Chapter 1032. Lu Xiaoyi thanked his senior brother for his kindness. Senior brother, take care of yourself. Even if there are changes, they might not necessarily be on a road sign. The return journey is also included, so you still need to be careful. The Great Path is missing, and people's hearts are in chaos. No one can protect themselves, so we must be extra careful. The two said goodbye, and Senior Brother Ko left on the raft. Since there was a replacement, he didn't want to linger in this place. Lu Xiaoyi looked at his back and began to ponder. Senior Brother Ko's intuition was right. Such a fixed place, no matter how hidden and inconspicuous it was, it still existed. With the accumulation of time, there would always be accidents. In the past, it could be purely regarded as a coincidence, but now that the overall environment had changed, there was an inevitability. The sect had a clear definition of the task of guarding the road sign. Maintenance, correction, and spirit replenishment were the main tasks, while defense was the secondary responsibility. It was unrealistic to expect a nascent soul stage cultivator to deal with the malicious attacks on his own. Not to mention a nascent soul stage cultivator. How could the true immortals at every relay point defend against the conscious attacks? Therefore, the more important thing was to deter and drive away the occasional passerby. If something really happened, they just had to leave. As long as they could pass the message back, it would be enough to see the general purpose of the malicious person. Fainting was not enough to kill him. When he came up with the idea of taking the task, he didn't expect to be sent to such a remote place. He couldn't back down, so he could only bite the bullet and do it. It was also because he chose the wrong time. If he came a little later, would this task have been taken by someone else? What he didn't know was that this task was specially reserved for him. He would receive it whenever he came, unless he didn't want to serve the sect. Flying close to the road sign and carefully studying its structure was part of his duty. From the outside, it looked like an inconspicuous meteorite, no different from the trillions of stones in the universe. It had a diameter of more than 100 feet, but in fact, the outer layer was made of Real stone, and only the inner layer was made of Real stone. He wasn't proficient in crafting weapons, but he had the detailed blueprints and basic explanations given by the sect. It wasn't too difficult for him to figure it out. After all, he was going to be the maintainer for the next few decades. How could he maintain it if he didn't know anything about it? In the process of understanding the road signs, a certain doubt arose in his heart. The more he studied the road signs, the more puzzled he became. This was because he gradually understood that even though the road signs were inconspicuous, they were related to the core of a domain, how to get out of the universe. The structure of the road sign was secondary. If it was really taken away by an outsider, they could probably replicate it by disassembling it. However, the most important thing was the road sign signal transmission system given to him by the sect. To put it simply, this thing was like a password book. Only with the password could the road sign work effectively, send out and receive messages normally. It was the secret key. The problem was, since when was his ear so valued by the sect? Fearless opened up all these core things to him. In the sect, he had never felt such importance. At most, he was a person who was gradually integrating into the carefree sect. His complete loyalty was still being tested. Or was it because they knew that this place was starting to become dangerous, so they found some cannon fodder? It didn't seem like it. He buried his doubts in his heart. It was useless to think too much about it. After studying the road signs, he prepared to go to the Changshuo domain of the main world to take a look. After all, he was alone in the outside world. There were many places where he would need the help of the cultivators of Changshuo. When the cultivators entered and exited the positive and negative space, the power to break the walls completely came from the fairy. This was the reason why he was so fond of this fairy. Under his control, the head of the fairy shone brightly. The energy was accumulating and the walls were weakening. The only thing that made him dissatisfied was that it took a long time. If he was in the middle of a battle, he wouldn't be able to use it all. After nearly 2 hours, it could be easily interrupted. It couldn't be used as a means of escape. There was nothing he could do. After 2 hours, the energy of the fairy was enough. It leaped forward and disappeared into the void. Taoist Kongu sat quietly in the main hall, his thoughts uncertain. Several Yuanying Taoists sat cross-legged in front of him, each of them frowning. One of them was still giving his report. That group of void travelers came to our Changsha domain again 2 days ago. They didn't do anything. They just had a drink in the mortal world and then left in a hurry. Just like before, they didn't disturb the domain at all. However, I saw that there were 2 more of them. Now, there are more than 10 of them. I think that Changshuan needs to come up with a plan. Otherwise, the strength of these people will continue to increase. One day, they will surpass the strength of Changsha. I don't think it's as simple as just having a drink. One of the Yuanying had a different opinion. Although they didn't interact with each other, I think they are quite polite. For the past 10 years, they didn't interfere with each other's business. Our Changsha cultivators have met them more than once when we went out into the void. They have never provoked us. If we act rashly and chase them away before we know their origins, won't we bring unknown danger to Changsha? Changsha doesn't have a heaven and earth membrane. Once we start fighting with cultivators of unknown origin, the damage to the mortal world is almost unavoidable. These consequences can't be ignored. Another Yuanying was also helpless. They don't leave and they don't stay. They refuse to communicate, and we don't understand their true intentions. It's really troublesome. Our Changsha domain is located in a remote area. There are no cultivator domains in the surrounding area. How do these people gather here? What's their purpose? Is it for our Changsha, or are they just passing by? Taoist Kongu sighed. These are all old topics. They had discussed this matter countless times over the past 10 years. Until now, they still couldn't come up with an effective solution. This was the awkwardness of small and medium-sized cultivator domains. Changsha domain was a medium-sized domain. There was only one sect, Lord Laojun Temple. It was an orthodox Taoist inheritance. As for its origin, too much time had passed, and no one knew. It was one of the countless seeds of Taoism in the universe. Because of the limited cultivation environment, its current scale was at its limit. There was limited room for growth. Lord Laojun Temple was a Taoist sect that enjoyed itself. Because it was located in a remote area, there weren't many disputes. The universe it was located in belonged to the kind where there were very few cultivator domains. It couldn't be compared to Zhou Xian's flourishing atmosphere. If they didn't fight for anything, they could still get by. Changsha also had a backer. It was the Zhou Xian upper domain that used this as the relay point of the waymark. Their relationship had been established for a long time. They were both Orthodox Taoists and could accept each other. Zhou Xian set up the anti-space waymark here. It needed the support of the natives like Changsha in certain aspects. Changsha relied on it to have a strong support force when there was danger from the outer domain. After so many years, both sides lived in harmony. It was also a model of harmonious relations between domains in the universe. Chapter 1033. P.S. Once Uncle makes a move, I'll have to peel off another layer of skin. I have no choice but to use the New Year goods as a replacement. Buy 5 and get 4 free. This request is a little too high. Can we negotiate? Yesterday, I sent out 1 chapter. Today, I'll send out 2 chapters. Any more, and there won't be any left. Sloth's book thrived precisely because it had a true book friend like this uncle who supported it with all his might after drinking. The change began more than 10 years ago. In the beginning, it was only 3 unfamiliar nascent soul cultivators that appeared around Changsha. In the world of cultivation, this was a rare sight for Changsha, but it was nothing new. The universe was boundless, and there were always passers-by. Even if there were passers-by, it was impossible for them to cut themselves off from the universe. However, what the 3 cultivators did next was rather strange. They did not communicate with each other. Travelers like them only had 2 choices when passing through a cultivation realm. One was to interact with the local cultivators, and the other was to leave and continue their journey. Indeed, there were very few people like them who just stayed in the space outside Changsha. They did not leave or interact with each other. Who knew what they were dawdling there for? The 3 Yuanying cultivators were not a threat to Changsha. Based on the way Changshuo dealt with outsiders, they would not act rashly against the three cultivators. It was not that they could not deal with them, but that they had to consider the possible hidden troubles behind them. The cautiousness of small forces in small realms when dealing with foreign cultivators was vividly displayed here. Under such an atmosphere, what made the people of Changshuo uneasy was that more and more cultivators from other realms had gathered. At the beginning, there were only 3 cultivators, but now there were more than 10 of them. Although they were still Yuaning cultivators, the trend was unsettling. Should we inform Zhou Xian? One of the Yuaning perfected masters asked. Another one immediately retorted. How? Inform what? They didn't even start a war with Changshuo, nor did they show any hostility. Yet here we are, being paranoid and treating everyone as an enemy. So what if we inform Zhou Xian? Will they send someone over or not? Changshuo do indeed have an agreement with Zhou Xian, but that refers to when the domain is facing a great enemy and cannot support us. It is not a small matter where we ask for reinforcements. If we do this too often, people will look down on us. Things like agreements also had their scope of application. It depended on the level of threat, and it was not something that could be casually mentioned. This was a matter of face and also the actual cost of reinforcements. How could cultivators not understand the story of the boy who cried wolf? The Yuaning from before sighed and said, Zhou Xian changed their guard a few months ago and sent a message to us. I was thinking that if I could take this opportunity to send the news back to Zhou Xian and see what they have to say about this matter. Now that the guard has changed, he won't be able to go back in a short period of time. We can only solve this problem by ourselves. Just as they were hesitating, a message talisman came from outside. Perfected Monarch Kong Gu checked it with his divine sense and smiled. It's the new Taoist from Zhou Xian. Since he is new, he probably doesn't know much about the surrounding environment of Changshuo. Why don't we reveal the situation to him when we introduce him? It's not an official request for help from Zhou Xian, but a sharing of resources. The Yuaning nodded and immediately went out of the main hall to welcome him. It was inevitable that small sects would lose some of their magnanimity in handling matters. This was also forced by the circumstances of life. Lu Xiaoyi was welcomed into the main hall. Perfected Monarch Kongu looked around and saw a young man walking in with swaying steps. His temperament was very strange. He did not have the sage-like demeanor of an orthodox Taoist cultivator. Instead, he was more like an itinerant cultivator. How could he know the details of a sect far away in Zhou Xian? He only thought that there were more than 100 people and that there were all kinds of strange things, which was normal. However, she couldn't hide her cultivation from him. She was at the middle stage of a nascent soul stage, so she was rather disappointed. In the world of cultivation, one's cultivation realm basically represented the right to speak. Who wouldn't want to have a stronger helper? Junior Xiaoyao Shan air greets perfected monarch. Lu Xiaoyi was very polite. In his view, every senior was worthy of respect, but it was different when he used his sword. Kong Gu was full of smiles. Disciple Xiaoyao, you are indeed a dragon among men. Changshuo also has some special food and wine. Since this is the first time we meet, we must welcome you with a feast. Lu Xiaoyi did not decline. The guest should follow the host's wishes, and it was not good to be too stiff. He could also use this opportunity to build a relationship with the native cultivators. An agreement was an agreement, and friendship was friendship. An agreement with friendship was more reliable and effective. During the feast, the guests and the host enjoyed themselves. The Changshuo cultivators slowly led the topic to the unknown extraterrestrial cultivators. How could the quick-witted Lu Xiaoyi not understand their intentions? If senior brother Ko knew about it, he would have mentioned it to him. Now, were they bullying him because he was young and inexperienced? However, it did not matter. It was a good thing that the people of Changshuo wanted something from him. It could shorten the distance between them, and it would be easier for him to ask in the future. In the cultivation world, it was nothing more than you using me and I using you. If you ask me if there is a similar situation in the relay points of Zhou Xian, I don't know. This is the first time I have accepted the task of guarding the coordinates. Before I came here, The sect did not mention any similar abnormalities. I think this is not a common phenomenon, right? However, if you ask me how to deal with this matter, I can only answer according to the rules of Joseon. In our opinion, the worst situation is to ignore it. We have to go out and ask clearly whether it is a literary inquiry or a martial inquiry. This was not the rule of Joseon, but the rule of the fifth ring. As the guardian Taoist of the relay point of Changsha, Lu Xiaoyi did not want to see so many strange cultivators drifting about outside, their whereabouts unknown. He could understand the survival of small domains, but he could stimulate their sense of responsibility. He did not like to be in an uncontrollable situation. Kong Gu smiled and said, "We have already asked the literary inquiry, but they did not give us an answer. I want to know how the martial inquiry in Joseon works." Lu Xiaoyi played it down. "That's right. Find a reason to fight. Let them know the pain, and they will naturally be willing to communicate. The sooner we fight, the sooner we communicate. If we are late, more and more people will gather. At that time, we will not dare to fight even if we want to. We can also determine whether we need to send a message back to Joseon. At that time, if you take action, I am willing to go with you and see if you are from the forces around Joseon. Of course, this possibility is not big." That was all he could say. If the cultivators of Changsha were still pretending to be turtles, then there was nothing he could do. If they did not care about their own domain, then there was no saving them. In the cultivation world, you must first determine if the outsiders were malicious, then other things. The banquet was tasteless. Other than the guests eating and drinking there, the hosts were all thinking. In the end, perfected Lord Kong Gu decided, "Fine, let's send people over to wrestle with them. It is not good for a perfected lord to take action. I am afraid that they will scatter and flee. Why don't we send a dozen or so Yuaning who are good at fighting, then it will not be considered bullying them. At that time, don't be ruthless and focus on fighting. I think they will understand our attitude. Little friend Dan, please go with them. You don't have to take action, just watch from the side. Changshua's troubles will be borne by the people of Changsha." Chapter 1034. P.S. Uncle, where are you now? A few days later, the 18 Yuaning cultivators of Changsha and Lu Xiaoyi left through the void. Perfected cultivator Kong Gu's claim of being good at fighting was somewhat exaggerated. Changshua's territory was limited. 2 of the 3 perfected cultivators were still outside, and the rest of the Yuaning cultivators were basically all here. There was nothing much to choose from. Those foreign cultivators stopped on a small planet less than 3 days away from Changsha. They did not try to conceal themselves and were very quiet. This made it difficult for people to judge their intentions. They did not rob, invade, harass, and they did not leave. When Changshua's group arrived near the small planet, the 11 cultivators on the opposite side lined up in the air. Obviously, they were not afraid. The leader of Changshua's group was Perfected Chao, a very experienced perfected cultivator. Perhaps because he was too old, he had lost his sharpness in the past. Perhaps perfected cultivator Kong Gu had noticed this. "I am Chao Zhan from Changshua's perfected cultivator temple. I came here to ask you the reason for staying in Changsha. How can you allow others to sleep beside your bed? If you still refuse to answer, Changsha may be a country of etiquette, but it also has many ruthless methods." Lu Xiaoyi was disheartened by these words. With such a start, there was basically no hope for a good result. They could either continue to remain silent or lie to deceive. They had been living in peace for too long and had forgotten the real rules of the cultivation world. One of the cultivators on the opposite side was neither servile nor overbearing. "We are here to stay temporarily. We have no ill intentions. Since more than 10 years ago, have you hurt anyone in Changsha? Have you ever robbed anything from your territory? Occasionally, we enter your territory just for the sake of words and banquets. We have never affected the order of your territory. The cultivation world has its own rules. How far do you want us to go? Cultivators walk the path of cultivation. The universe is vast, and the territory is yours. We respect it, but you can't have the territory around your territory, right? Taoist Kong Gu had already reminded Chao Zhan that he wouldn't be able to gain the upper hand with words, so he should hurry up and drive the other party away. Now, with just a few words of courtesy, he felt like he was being led astray again. It really wasn't as refreshing as what that cultivator Zhou Xian had said, to directly attack the other party. If he were to attack now, he would feel embarrassed and angry instead. If we don't get along, it's pointless to say another word. Since you and I have different ideologies, then let's follow the old rules of the cultivation world. Only the strong are respected. With a wave of his hand, he was about to mobilize the cultivators of Changshuo to fight, but the Taoist on the other side shouted loudly to stop him. Since Changshuo is to drive people away, killing is the most important thing. Once a chaotic battle ensues, death and injury are inevitable. At that time, there will be no room for negotiation between you and me. Why don't we do it this way? You have 18 people, and we have 11 people. How about we compete in a duel? How many rounds? Victory or defeat will be decided by the rules of Changshuo. When Taoist Master Chao heard this, he was a little hesitant. Before he came, Martial Uncle Kong Gu had told him to try his best not to cause any deaths. If his own people died, he would feel bad, but if the other party died, it might lead to revenge. The best way was to fight in moderation. Not only did he show his tough attitude, but he also didn't lose his magnanimity. This wasn't easy. Once it started, it would be uncontrollable. This was inevitable. Therefore, he was hesitant. After discussing with a few other Taoist masters, they all felt that a duel was a good idea under the current circumstances. Not only could they compare who was better, it would also be easier for them to control their strength and advance and retreat freely. Finally, Taoist Master Chao decided, let's compete in 7 rounds. Whoever can win 4 rounds will be the boss. The Taoist in front of him cupped his fists and smiled. Winning 4 out of 7 is the magnanimity of your region. But we have come from afar to harass you, and we feel uneasy. Since we are outsiders, we should have the self-awareness of outsiders. How about this? In the 7 rounds, we will leave on our own if we lose 2 rounds. We will not stay in Changsha. This way, we can show that we have no ill intentions. These words made Lu Xiaoyi, who was beside him, shake his head vigorously. He was an old ruffian and had his own unique understanding of battles. He knew that before the battle even started, the layout had already begun. In this aspect, the cultivators of Changshuo were very naive. They had been here for more than 10 years, so they definitely had some understanding of the abilities of the people of Changsha. That was why they dared to say such big words. On the other hand, increasing the difficulty of the duel was undoubtedly forcing the people of Changshuo to have no room to retreat. If they really lost, they would be embarrassed to bully others with their advantage in numbers. It was a very clever strategy. Imperceptibly, they once again showed their selfless attitude. Was that really the case? Taoist Master Chao agreed immediately. The reason why he chose 7 rounds was that among the cultivators on his side, there were a few Taoist masters who were purely there to make up the numbers. They weren't strong enough to fight. Everyone arranged their rounds. Of course, Lu Xiaoyi wasn't included in Changshua's side. He was now purely an observer, so there was no problem with his strength or reputation. After the arrangements were made, everyone began to fight. Round after round, the faces of the people of Changshuo became gloomier and gloomier. They felt more and more ashamed. The final result was just as Lu Xiaoyi expected. All 7 rounds were lost, and the one who lost was Changshuo. They lost their temper. They lost so much that even struggling seemed unnecessary. The Taoist master on the other side didn't have a trace of arrogance or conceit. He still spoke softly. We have been in the universe for a long time and are used to drifting. We fight with the heavens, void beasts, and humans. Hence, we specialize in the Tao of spells. It's not like the orthodox Taoist sects of your region that cultivate one's body and mind. This battle is just a joke. Your region didn't use all of its strength. You even have a Taoist master who didn't come out. This is your tolerance for us drifters. For more than 10 years, Your region has always been broad-minded. We all know that. I still say the same thing. We are gathered here not to do anything to Changsha. It's just that the reason is a little hard to say. It's because of respect that we can't lie and deceive you. We can only keep silent. Fellow Taoist, please return to the mountain and tell the elders clearly. If there's a day when we can speak freely, we won't hide anything from them. They gave enough face, lowered their stance, and were strong themselves. With all these factors, what other choice did the people of Changsha have other than covering their faces and leaving? They had the advantage of being the host, the number of people, and the familiarity of the environment. They had a good hand, but they played it badly. Lu Xiaoyi followed them back without revealing anything. He was covered in dirt, but he didn't care. He finally realized that there was no such thing as a good idea in this world. The best was the one that suited the style of different cultivators. His style was only suitable for himself. Even the people of the Five Rings Qing Sky sect might not be suitable for the people of Zhou, not to mention the people of Changsha who were a mess. If he had known this would happen, he would have suggested to let the people of Changsha come here to send warmth and make friends. With resources, with his wife as his wife, the results might be better. But then again, only cultivators with the style and attitude of Changsha could be the best place to set up a relay point in the universe, right? If it had been someone with a little bit of ambition, they would have long been surrounded by endless moths and endless troubles. Each had its own pros and cons. It was hard to say whether it was good or bad. But there was one point. If something happened to the coordinates, it would be a little unreliable to rely on the people of Changsha. This was the biggest impression Lu Xiaoyi had from the battle. Chapter 1035. Lu Xiaoyi was someone who liked to pretend to be weak, but he never pretended to be weak for no reason. Just like this time, he couldn't think of what he would gain if he attacked. First of all, he would anger this group of strange and polite wanderers. His sword was very heavy, and when the opponent had a strong will to resist, it would become even heavier. There was no guarantee that it wouldn't kill. Secondly, it would make the cultivators of Changsha embarrassed. 18 people couldn't solve the problem, but he could solve it alone. If he had the ability, why didn't he attack earlier? Why did he have to wait for others to make a fool of themselves before he attacked? People with weak tempers were more likely to be hurt internally. This was the truth. If he buried such feelings in his heart, who knew when it would bring him a lot of trouble? You could underestimate the strength of the people of Changsha, but you couldn't underestimate their ability to ruin things. This was also an experience. He had mixed feelings about these inexplicable outsiders. It wasn't that they were strong, but that their 7-0 record was set off by their opponents. If it was Yuanying and the others, they wouldn't be able to win. If it was the swordsmen of Shadow Sword Palace, these wanderers wouldn't even be able to win a single match, let alone great swordmaster Lu. What he found strange wasn't this, but the way these cultivators fought, their unique application of the Tao realm. It wasn't that these cultivators had a deep understanding of the Tao realm. In Lu Xiaoyi's opinion, their understanding of the Tao realm was only at an ordinary level, and there were even some flaws in some aspects. However, their application was obviously different from the mainstream Tao realm. The so-called mainstream Tao realm he was referring to was the Five Rings, Blue Sky, and Zhou. Thinking about it, the Tao realm of these influential, super-large Tao realms in the main world should be able to represent the mainstream, right? It wasn't a big deal for a person to open up a unique path in the Tao realm. Lu Xiaoyi was the same. But if the 7 cultivators on the field were all like this, then it was very clear that there was a problem. Moreover, it was in 7 different Tao realms. What kind of orthodoxy was it? Sect? Force? How could it allow the disciples below to be so different from others in all aspects of the Tao realm? And this was only the 7 of them. He dared to bet that the 4 who didn't go on the field were also different in their own ways. Xiao Yaoyu couldn't do such a thing. The 7 Taoist sects of Zhou couldn't do it. Even the supreme 3 pure ones might not be able to do it. Xin Yuan couldn't do it either. This was what he was interested in. There seemed to be something that was beyond his understanding. If he wanted to get to the bottom of this, he could not act recklessly. He had to take a closer look. Returning to Laojun Temple of Changsha, Daoist Chao and the rest went to look for their martial uncle. Lu Xiaoyi did not follow them. They were a family behind closed doors. How awkward would it be for an outsider like him? Should Empty Valley be punished or not? He wandered around the mortal world of the Changsha world and inspected the entertainment industry here, learning about the different customs and customs. A month later, he bade farewell to perfected Monarchon Gu and returned to the reverse space waymark. Lu Xiaoyi did not try to get in touch with the strangers who were still on the asteroid because he really could not think of a way to get close to and gain their trust. Since he was not confident, he might as well not go. This was not the shaking shadow realm. It was not a place that could be controlled by flying swords. He had a vague judgment, but it was still hazy. If he wanted to verify it, he could only see if he could find any clues in the reverse space. Lu Xiaoyi understood his situation very well. As long as he was in a place, even if there was nothing wrong, something would happen. In this sense, he was a little envious of Senior Brother Ko's character. He had been guarding this place for dozens of years, but he could not see anything. It was also a kind of blessing. Maybe this was his way of cultivation, turning a blind eye and hearing nothing. Was this a good attitude for cultivation? There was a problem with Lu Xiaoyi's control of the rhythm of his cultivation. Before he took the mission, he raised his cultivation to the nascent soul level, which was less than 5 inches. He wanted to find an opportunity to cross this threshold, but he did not expect to be sent to such a lonely and barren environment like the reverse space. The weather was limited, the spiritual opportunity was limited, and even people were rare. It was very difficult to cross the 5 inches threshold with such a simple cultivation. In other words, he had temporarily stopped eating spiritual machines. It was useless. No matter how much he ate, he would not be able to go up. After all, cultivation had its own rules. It was impossible to plan it perfectly and not waste any time. If he did not need to spend too much time on cultivation, he would spend it on the Tao realm. Merit, void, 5 elements, slaughter, and destiny. After he became a Yuanying, these Tao realms had been greatly improved. His vision had been broadened, and his understanding of the nature of the universe had increased. There was unlimited space for him to comprehend these Tao realms. There was never enough time. Some cultivators would only focus on one Tao realm for their entire life. Only then would they be able to achieve great things. Lu Xiaoyi did not think that he could reach the level of others in all the innate Taos. This was unrealistic and too arrogant. He focused his understanding of the Tao realm on 2 aspects. One was the in-depth and comprehensive foundation of the Tao realm, and the other was the help it could provide in battle. He was a swordsman, and he would never forget why he studied the Tao realm in the first place. It was not for research. It was not for dissemination. It was not for writing books. His goal was very simple, and that was to find ways to kill more happily. The Tao realm was boundless, and a cultivator might not be able to fully understand it in his lifetime. He had to make a choice and deepen his understanding of the Tao realm. This was especially important to Lu Xiaoyi, because he might come into contact with more than 30 Tao realms in the future. How could he not make a choice? He would not be able to comprehend them, even if he worked himself to death. Cultivation focused on determining the direction, and the rest was to persevere. Then he would explore the things he was interested in this lonely antimatter space. With the road mark as the center, Lu Xiaoyi began to draw circles. Within the largest range of his divine sense, he expanded them one circle after another. He was trying to find something in his surroundings. His thoughts were meticulous, and his considerations were often different from others. Were the people of Changsha guessing which universe these outsiders came from? Which universe? He directly guessed that these people came from the antimatter space. There were a few hints, such as the uniqueness of these people's Tao realm, Changshua's unique location. Senior Brother Ko once mentioned that there were people spying on them from the antimatter space. If his guesses were correct, then some things could be explained. What were they waiting for? Of course, they were waiting for their companions in the antimatter space. A single tree does not make a forest. If the cultivators from the antimatter space wanted to survive in the origin world, they would not be able to survive without a certain scale. Huddling together for warmth was the norm. The key was under the premise that the Tao realm collapsed. Originally, they were unwilling to come out, but now, because of the temptation of the innate Tao, they all came out. He did not want to care about the flow of talents between the two worlds. Man walked to the top, and water flowed to the bottom. He, Lu Xiaoyi, was not afraid of competition, as long as it had nothing to do with the 5 rings of clear sky. Chapter 1036. He did not have any psychological burden to carry out a dangerous investigation alone in an unfamiliar space. He knew his own strength very well. If a perfected cultivator came, he might not be able to defeat him, but it would be easy for him to escape. Moreover, he would definitely be able to make the perfected cultivator suffer a loss in battle. No one would want to provoke such a low-level opponent unless they were mortal enemies. There was no benefit in winning, and it would be embarrassing if he lost. If it was just yuanying, then it would be a problem of how many he could deal with at the same time. His nascent soul was different from the rest. It brought him an earth-shattering change in his strength, and it could not be measured by ordinary yuanying. As for the road sign, he never cared about it. In essence, this was also something that could be set up at any time. Its value was not worth mentioning, and it might take some time. However, the upper realm like Zhou would definitely have other arrangements not too far away from Changsha. It would not be just this one point, and there was no need for him to guard it like a landlord. After all, to him, if there was a real battle, he would not care about this thing at all. He had just entered yuanying not long ago, so he still could not completely understand what was special about breaking through the walls of the positive and negative space. Was it as he passed through, or did it have to have a certain direction? For example, the positive and negative space barriers had different thickness. Should a cultivator choose to enter and exit from the weakest part of the barrier, and the position to enter the main world? Would he fall into a barren universe where cultivation was extinct if he recklessly passed through it? In any case, the vicinity of Changshuo was a very good crossing point. It was very close to the main world's cultivation world, and it was beneficial for him to understand the specific situation of the main world's cultivation world, as well as his own position in the main world. Moreover, the space barrier here was definitely thinner. He wanted to see if he could find any clues left behind by negative space cultivators passing through the space barrier. Unfortunately, after nearly half a year of searching, he found nothing. After careful consideration, he decided to change his direction. Since he was limited by his current level of knowledge and did not understand many things, he should ask someone who understood. He returned to the Changshuo boundary again and found Supreme Konggu. Konggu was waiting for him with tea. "Young friend, do you have any requests for this meeting? I, Changshuo, have an ancient contract with Zhou Xian. As long as it is within my power, I will not refuse." Konggu was still a little embarrassed. Half a year ago, he had returned without any achievements. He had lost a lot of face and was seen by the people of Zhou Xian. Although this person was very sensible and did not say anything, the way he spoke was a little unnatural. He wanted to get rid of this matter as soon as possible. He thought that it was nothing more than asking for some resources. If it was not too much, they would just agree to it. Lu Xiaoyi said courteously, "Junior has come here because I have something to ask Senior. The last time I dealt with those outsiders, it was all because of my poor strategy. My heart was uneasy, and I have been brooding over it. I have some doubts and guesses in my heart, but I have little talent and knowledge, so I can't prove myself. Therefore, I came to Senior to clear my doubts." These words made Konggu feel very comfortable. It was not that cultivator Changshuo was incompetent, but that his idea was not good. He knew that he was being courteous, but it was an excuse that gave him face. As long as everyone took care of each other, they could get along well. Stroking his beard, he smiled. "What, Senior? This desolate place is ignorant and inexperienced. It's not as vast as Zhou Xian. Little friend, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. As long as this old Taoist knows, I will tell you everything. Lu Xiaoyi did not hide anything. Some things could not be hidden, especially the perfected cultivator who was close by. Even if he was a perfected cultivator from a small sect, his 1,000 years of experience could not be taken lightly. It was better to pull him in and make him an insider. When he really needed Chang Shua's help, it would not be too sudden. Junior thinks that the origins of these people are very strange. They seem to be related to a certain sky region. With Lu Xiaoyi's point, Konggu immediately became alert. Perfected cultivators had the vision of perfected cultivators and immediately understood that this was most likely not a guess, but a fact. He was a little flustered. Little friend, you're right. I think that's most likely the case. Do you think we should inform Zhou Xian on the spot? This is a big matter. We must not delay it. Lu Xiaoyi knew what he was worried about and comforted him. This disciple has already made arrangements. Senior need not worry. I think that if they are really cultivators from a negative space, then what they have shown is probably their sincerity. To the cultivators from the negative space coming to the main world, but occupying such an important place like Changshuo is 100 harms and no benefits to them. Their goal is bigger. Only a region like Zhou Xian can enter their eyes, right? Their goal is more realistic. They will also find a universe that is not so important. A cultivation environment that is not so dense is the way to survive. Is it possible that once they come out, they will clash with the cultivation forces of the main world? That's not realistic. Therefore, Changshuo will definitely not move. At most, it will be a springboard to cross the barrier. Senior, if you pretend to not know, they will also pretend not to know. For such a big matter, it's better to wait for Zhou Xian to make a decision before making a decision. Konggu was anxious just now. Now that he thought about it, he knew that this person from Zhou Xian was not lying. The key was, even if he did not do this, what else could he do? At first, he thought that this was a loser who came from some region, but since their roots were from the negative space, they were a huge monster to a small Changsha. He did not have the heart to fight directly. Little friend, you are right. I will temporarily seal this news and not let it leak out to avoid panic. I wonder if there is anything you do not understand. Now that we are all in the same boat, there is no need to be polite. Great, now we're all in the same boat. It was no wonder that Konggu lost his composure. This was a confrontation between two worlds and countless universes. If Changshuo was caught in the middle, it could not even be called cannon fodder and could be crushed at any time. Lu Xiaoyi finally brought the old true lord into his rhythm. What I want to know is about this specific problem of the negative space transmigration. In other words, if the negative space really broke through from here to the main world, then where is their position in the negative space? Is it close to the road sign? Or can they break through from afar and come to Changshuo? Senior, you are very experienced and have been guarding this place for a long time. I think you should know something about this, right? Konggu nodded. Of course, he was very experienced. In fact, as the highest decision-maker in Changsha, he also had the ability to enter and exit the negative space at any time. Otherwise, if the cultivators guarding Zhou Xian were in trouble, who would help? Good question. I think, little friend, you were suspicious and have checked the area around the road sign. In the end, you did not find anything, so you came to ask me, right? You might not understand the formation mechanism of the negative space transmigration channel, so you did this. In fact, the road sign is very useful. Without the road sign to provide the correct position, the construction of the transmigration channel has no direction at all. In other words, even if an outsider opens a channel at the position of the road sign, if he cannot receive the information of the road sign, when he comes out of the main world, he will not know which universe he will be in. It is impossible for him to appear near Chang Shua. The slightest mistake can lead to a huge error. This is the secret of space. Chapter 1037. Under Lu Xiaoyi's questioning, Konggu did not hide anything. These things were mainly a matter of realm. Once one reached the realm, with Zhou Xian's background, it would not be a secret. He just said in advance. The anti-space waymark had two functions. One was to relay, which meant that the ferry would not leave the anti-space. It would obtain the position of the next waymark relay point and continue its journey. The other was to break through the wall and enter the Changshuo sky region of the main world from here. Breaking through the wall was not as easy as one imagined. It was not correct to think that the separation between the positive and negative space was like a paper shell. As long as one broke through the wall near the waymark, one would definitely be able to reach the Changshuo sky region. At least, it was not completely correct. The wall still had a thickness. This thickness could not be seen, touched, or measured. It belonged to another category of the space domain. It could be imagined that the process of breaking through the wall required one to pass through a different dimensional space. The function of the waymark was to guide the direction of this different dimensional passage. If the direction was right, one would reach the Changshuo sky region after going out. If the direction was wrong, one might run to another universe. It was completely random because the different dimensional space was the most complicated and profound aspect of the space domain. In other words, not just anyone could break through the wall at the anti-space waymark to reach the Changshuo sky region. What do you mean? Lu Xiaoyi frowned. Things were more complicated than he thought. It involved the space Dao realm that he had not mastered yet. Konggu said solemnly. The person who came could accurately find the location of the Changshuo sky region of the main world. He must have deciphered the information key in the waymark. Otherwise, it would be impossible for a few people to come every few years and gather near Changshuo. Therefore, this relay point had long been exposed in front of the anti-space cultivators. The only difference was the extent of the exposure. Now it seems that the scope has not spread. Otherwise, it would not be a few people coming, but an overwhelming number. Lu Xiaoyi asked, "What's the point of these people staying near Changshuo? In theory, if they placed the gathering point further away, it would be harder to be discovered, right?" Konggu pondered and said, "Maybe it would be faster to meet up with their companions here, and it would be more convenient for them to enter at any time. There are many benefits. They have only just arrived, so they should not be too familiar with the environment of the origin world. Therefore, it is not good for them to go too far away." Lu Xiaoyi still could not understand it. How could you not feel a negative space cultivator coming in and out? Can't you feel it? I can't feel it either? Konggu shrugged. It's normal that I can't feel it. After all, the authority level of the key I obtained was not high enough. You can only go in and out for your own convenience, but you can't observe others. Otherwise, wouldn't every move of Zhou Xian's cultivators be under my Changshuo's control? As for why your ex couldn't feel it, or why you didn't feel it, that's your own business. You can go back and ask. There are different levels of authorization for the use of the road signs. Mine is the lowest level. It seems that the level of the Guardians isn't high either. Only the sect's large-scale secret operations can use the highest level of authorization, right? But no matter what, if these people wanted to avoid your eyes and ears, they must have done it when you were in the Longshuo realm of the origin world. You were at the reverse space beacon, so it was impossible for them to hide from you. The two of them came up with a plan in the secret room, and only parted after a long time. Lu Xiaoyi was very curious, and Konggu was concerned about the safety of the realm, so there was no room for mistakes. So they hit it off immediately. This time, Lu Xiaoyi was sightseeing in the Longshuo realm. He watched the mountains and played with the water and lingered in the human world. In the end, he took a fancy to a side palace in the realm. On top of the hanging waterfall of Mount Hu, an extremely exquisite building was constructed. The Guardians of Zhou Xian took turns to stay between the reverse space relay point and the origin world's Longshuo realm. Zhou Xian did not have any requirements for this, and it was up to the wishes of the cultivators. Some were willing to stay in the origin world, and some were willing to stay in the reverse space alone. As long as they could ensure the normal operation of the road signs, nothing else mattered. Relatively speaking, there were still more cultivators who were willing to stay in the origin world. Most of the cultivators would stay in the origin world for 9 out of 10 years, and they would occasionally go to the reverse space to take a look. That place was too torturous and lacked vitality and spiritual vigor. It was not a place to travel freely. Since they spent most of their time in Longshuo, naturally, there would be those who were greedy and wanted to build their own cave abodes. The hanging waterfall of Mount, who was an extremely famous place in the Longshuo realm. The terrain was beautiful and dangerous, and the spiritual veins gathered at one point. It was of great help to a cultivator's understanding of the five elements. The people of Zhousien could not stay here forever. They changed every few decades, and this place became the temporary residence of many guardians in Longshan. It had been renovated and expanded countless times, and it became more exquisite and elegant. More than half of the guardians had stayed here to cultivate their bodies and minds, and they also left behind countless insights. The cultivators who were made of iron and had waterfalls flowing water were also an anomaly. Of course, there were also those who did not care about it, especially the two Buddhist sects in Zhousien. No monks had ever set foot here. This was a difference in philosophy, and there was no need to elaborate. Lu Xiaoyi also took a liking to this place. Once he came here, he did not leave. There were immortal wines and delicacies, and there were beautiful scenery in front of him. It was also a great joy in life. He stayed like this for a year before he remembered to return to the reverse space to take a look. Generally speaking, the guardians here were like this. In the beginning, they would not return to the reverse space often to fulfill their responsibilities. As they became more familiar with it, the time they took to fulfill their responsibilities became shorter and shorter, and the interval between their responsibilities became longer and longer. The time they spent in the reverse space increased, and this was also human nature. As soon as the ferry entered the reverse space, the road sign was close at hand. However, two cultivators came down from the ferry, Lu Xiaoyi and Konggu. The two of them wandered around the road sign and had an in-depth discussion about the road sign. A few days later, Konggu took out his own reverse space ferry. This was prepared by Zhou Xian for Changsha. One was for use, and the other was sealed for emergencies. When I return to Changshuo, I will immediately take your substitute to the Hoku Palace. From then on, you will have the illusion that you have been staying in the main world. The staff is reliable, so don't worry. As long as you don't expose yourself, there will be no problem at the Hoku Palace. I will personally watch over it. Why I'm worried about is you. Staying here for a long time is a psychological test for a cultivator. Moreover, you can't move casually. If people know that there is a guardian here, they may not be willing to take the risk. Lu Xiaoyi smiled and said, just think of it as a closed-door training. Anyway, with the space books that Senior gave me, it will be enough for me to study for a long time. Konggu waved his hand and said, the ancient books of Laojun Temple are not as profound as Zhou Xian's. They are just to pass the time. Little friend Dan, there is one thing you need to understand. Waiting like this will not necessarily give you results. You may not find the slightest abnormality for several years. This is a test of patience and perseverance. You must be mentally prepared. In addition, if you find anything, remember to inform me first. You are alone. If you blindly stick your head out, I can't help you in the main world. Chapter 1038. Lu Xiaoyi began to hide near the anti-space waymark. There were few stars in the antimatter space, but there were still many meteorites. He did not need to find a large meteorite to hide his tracks. 100 feet or even 100 feet would suffice. When one's cultivation reached the level of yuanying, his ability to hide his tracks was much better than before, especially with the special way of forming his nascent soul and his special body. In the void, he had many ways to hide his tracks. Finally, he dispersed his aura to tens of thousands of stars in the anti-space. Even if someone approached, it would be difficult to find a human hiding in the dark meteorite. The reason why he did this was no longer a matter of curiosity, even if he acted very curious on the outside. He had a lot of questions. Why did the sect send him to this place? He had discussed the issue of identity with Qing Xian in depth. They all believe that their undercover identities have been exposed from the beginning. It was only because they were insignificant that they were allowed to be observed by others. Now that they had formed their nascent souls, they could be considered to have achieved something. Then, would the big shots in Zhou Xian still let them go? If they did not let them go and allowed them to stay in Zhou Xian's system, what were the big shots trying to achieve? There must be something wrong with this abnormal situation. He was not a core member, and his identity could not completely guarantee his loyalty. However, he was sent such a mission that might involve the big secret of Zhou Xian. There was only one conclusion. The big shots did this on purpose. They wanted to tell him something through this mission. This was in line with the behavior of cultivators. They did not say anything and let you understand it yourself. What you finally understood had nothing to do with the big shots. It would not affect the state of mind and would not affect the state of mind. Before leaving, Kuchadawa's pretense could not fool Lu Xiaoyi, who had lived 2 lives. This mission was customized for him. After more than 800 years of cultivation, he understood a truth. Things in cultivation were not one or the other. People treated him as a chess piece because he had shown the outstanding ability of a qualified chess piece in the process. There was no need to resist. He only needed to maintain his own heart in the game of chess. One day, he would jump out of the game and become a chess player from a chess piece. Or he would put in a bigger and higher level chess piece. Therefore, being a pawn was actually not that unacceptable. What did the big shots want him to know? This was the key to the problem. If you don't look for it, no one will tell you. You are just a failed chess piece, a useless chess piece. In the future, the big shots will no longer consider your usefulness. Perfected monarch Kong Gu thought that this must be related to Changshuo, and Lu Xiaoyi did not have the heart to attack him. What did it have to do with Changshuo? He was just a passerby. What was there to be worried about? It was just a passerby. But this definitely had something to do with him, Lu Xiaoyi. In other words, it had something to do with his origin, blue sky of the 5th ring. This was what the boss wanted to tell him. As for what kind of relationship it was, he would have to find it out himself. Burying himself deep into the meteorite was also a unique way of cultivation. For him, who had always been unpredictable, it was a way he had never done before. He was waiting here for those who were trying to sneak into the origin world. Changshuo might not be the only smuggling port, but he could only guard one. He hoped to find out their smuggling method, composition, purpose, and so on. The most important thing was whether there was a mole. Kong Gu once said that he suspected that the secret code of the road sign had been leaked long ago. His judgment was that it was technically cracked, but there was another possibility, and that was that the Zhou Xian people leaked it themselves for a certain purpose. This was the key that Lu Xiaoyi wanted to understand. In the darkness of the meteorite, he continued his exploration of the Tao realm and did not take another step out of the void. When he forced himself for a certain purpose, for him, who was already yuanying, it was not difficult for him to sit for years or even decades. This could be a long wait. In order to pass the long night, he added a new Tao realm direction to himself, space. This was a very important direction, a hurdle that every yuanying could not avoid in the Tao realm. You could choose not to use it as your Tao, but you must be proficient in it because there were too many aspects that could not be separated from the support of space. Escape could not be separated from space. Fighting could not be separated from space. In the main and reverse universe, all kinds of support methods could not be separated from space. In the battle with the monkey Heng, he did not only suffer a great loss in the Tao realm, but also in the Tao of space. Otherwise, the monk would not have been able to catch up with him. Otherwise, the monk would not have been able to escape after being cut down. All of these were the power of space. It was a very direct thing that could substantially and rapidly improve the abilities of yuanying cultivators. After he received the mission from Xiaoyao Mountain, he collected a lot of Xiaoyao travel space theory jade slips so that he could pass the time in the loneliness of the negative space. Now, he got some from Laojun Temple. Combined with his basic knowledge of the Tao of Space when he was in the nascent soul realm, it was enough for him to push his Tao of Space to a higher level. He could not wait for the fragment of the Tao of Space. That thing could not wait. As the era changed, some innate Taos would collapse at the end, including space. He could not wait for the fragment and not touch the Tao of space for thousands of years. It was too stupid. After so many years, countless powerful cultivators in the cultivation world had always guessed the order of the collapse of the innate Taos. They all had their own opinions and could not come to a consensus. For example, the collapse of Tai Su was beyond the expectations of the cultivation world. They originally thought that the innate Taos of slaughter and destruction would collapse earlier, so as to deepen the chaos before the era of the universe changed. But there was one thing that everyone agreed on. That was the last thing that would collapse of the 36 innate Taos would be time. Once time collapsed and the era changed, it would be logical and natural. The connections between the Taos of space and time were very deep, which also meant that the collapse of the Tao of space would also be very late. Lu Xiaoyi could not afford to wait, so he had to make a move now, so that he would not be at a disadvantage in the future battles. The negative space was dark and deep. There was no life. The only thing that had not changed since the beginning of time was the passage of time. Occasionally, one or two void beasts would pass by here in a hurry. With their intelligence, they could not discover the use of the waymark and the human hiding in another meteorite not far away. They only treated this place as a part of the endless dead silence of the universe. There were also 2 times when human cultivators approached, and they came on ferries from Zhouxian. One was from the primeval cave sect, and the other was from the Qingwei immortal sect. It showed that these 2 sects were different from the other Taoist sects, and had the ambition to participate in the war outside the universe. The 2 ferries did not stop at the waymark relay point of Changsha. Instead, they changed their direction and headed for the next waymark. The cultivators also did not discover Lu Xiaoyi, who was not breathing at all. As long as the waymark was operating normally, nothing else mattered. They could not ask the Guardian to guard the waymark forever. It was too unreasonable. Chapter 1039. Lu Xiaoyi stayed in this state for 5 years, and nothing happened. One day, after 5 years, Supreme Konggu couldn't help but come in and take a look. After carefully observing for a long time, he sighed in the direction of the meteorite where Lu Xiaoyi was. If not for this junior Zhou Xian telling him that he would be hiding here, he wouldn't have been able to discover his aura with just a rough sweep of his divine sense. He knew that he shouldn't disturb him. Since he had done it, he had to do it properly. He couldn't give up halfway. After a short pause, he immediately returned to the origin world. No matter what the reason was, this one ear's way of doing things was still very admirable. Since he had made a decision, he would do his best. He was a seed of cultivation. Taoist, Sanda stood on the small planet with a lonely expression. The 11 of them, as Lu Xiaoyi guessed, came from the only cultivation continent in the negative space, Heaven's Choice Continent. The negative space was as big as the origin world, but in the cultivation world, there was only one place, and that was their origin world, Heaven's Choice Continent. Of course, the size of the Heaven's Choice Continent wasn't something the cultivation world of the main world could imagine. It was an extremely large continent that was still slowly expanding. This was also the reason why there were so few stars in the antimatter space. A certain amount of stars were absorbed into the Heaven's Choice Continent and became a part of it. Cultivating in Heaven's Choice Continent was not any worse than the origin world. This was the concept that was instilled in them from the moment they started cultivating. In fact, to them, the negative space was the true universe because their continent was bigger and more concentrated. In the eyes of the Heaven's chosen people, the outside world was the anti-space. This was because the cultivation worlds here were all scattered and didn't belong to one another. They were far apart from each other and had to experience endless cosmic phenomena. There were all sorts of natural and man-made dangerous environments. But the collapse of the great Tao destroyed their self-confidence in the origin world. The collapse of the innate great Tao, the collapse of Heaven's Choice Continent's great Tao tablet. Not only that, it also involved the collapse of many innate great Tao tablets. This was the predicament of Heaven's Choice Continent's cultivators. They weren't like the origin world's cultivators, who relied purely on their understanding of the Tao to enter the Tao. Instead, they relied more on the Tao tablets that were everywhere in Heaven's Choice continent to comprehend the Tao. Usually, there was no difference, but when the Tao tablets collapsed, they immediately fell into a state of helplessness. What to do? Apart from coming to the origin world and using the origin world's methods to continue their cultivation, there was no better way. So far, only 4 innate Taos have been destroyed. There was still time, but no one knew how long it would take. Cultivators who lacked initiative would place their hopes on the heavens, hoping that their path towards the great Tao would collapse a little later. But there would always be people who dared to challenge the heavens. They would take the initiative to step out and strive to carve out a new world for themselves in the origin world. After all, such people were in the minority. Not all cultivators dared to face them head-on, but the 11 of them were. Through some obscure channel, they found a way to come to the main world. Everyone took out all their belongings and gathered together a ferry that could travel between the main and reverse universes. Then, they began their adventure. This kind of behavior was not a problem for the high and mighty half-immortals. Half-immortals had their own troubles. They were 2 different things. Yuanying was the lowest level to be able to escape from the antimatter space. It was the most basic level. So 1 step at a time, it was very difficult to walk. Because there was no one to lead the way, it was very difficult for this group of people to come out. No matter if it was breaking out of the confinement of the Heaven's Choice continent, or finding the weak point of the spatial barrier that led to the origin world, or passing through the barrier that was full of loopholes. In the end, they had to endure the suspicion and mistrust of the natives in the origin world. Their strategy was to first send 2 people out and observe the situation. After a period of stability, they would then pick up the others. The process was very slow, but there was no other way. They had to avoid the attention of the guarding cultivators and familiarize themselves with the experience of passing through the spatial barrier. Also, the small ferry could only carry 2 people at a time. They couldn't afford a bigger ferry. Fortunately, although the whole process was bumpy, they finally got through it without any major mistakes. This rumored Changshua's waymark relay point was indeed the place with the most lax security in the anti-space. More than 10 years had passed. Their 11-people advance party couldn't be said to have gained a firm foothold in Changshua, but at least they had gained a foothold for the time being. The next step would be to follow the main group behind them. This was an even more difficult challenge. They were the most elite, and the rest were much weaker. However, in order to survive in this new universe, they couldn't just rely on their outstanding combat abilities. They also needed the assistance of cultivators with all kinds of skills. This was the only way to survive. Yes, they were very ambitious. They didn't want to rely on anyone. Instead, they wanted to find a suitable celestial body in this origin world to establish their own orthodoxy. For a group of cultivators who were only at the Yuanying level, this kind of thinking was a little unrealistic. Originally, they had made 2 backup plans. If they really couldn't hold on, they would first find a force to rely on. However, in the process of dealing with the Changshuo realm, they saw the hope of surviving independently. Even a realm with the strength of Changshuo could survive without any worries in the origin world's cultivation world. Why couldn't they? This was the reason why they had been loitering around Changshuo, probing back and forth without any malicious intent. Of course, they didn't plan to do anything to Changshuo. This was a rational analysis, and it was also their usual style of doing things. They could easily attract the revenge of the origin world's cultivators. Wouldn't it be better to find a quieter cultivation celestial body? They quietly waited for the collapse of the Great Tao. Right now, judging by the time, their main group should have arrived at the location of the anti-space beacon, right? They could only guess. Yuanying level cultivators couldn't send messages across the main and reverse universes. In fact, true monarchs couldn't either. They could only follow the plan. Senior Marshal Brother Thirda, the ferry is ready. We can set off at any time. It's just that the number of people is really awkward. It can only carry 2 people at a time. Excluding the person controlling it, it can only carry 1 person at a time. How long will it take? We can't even bear the energy consumption. A companion came over and complained in a low voice. Third, Dick comforted him. Don't worry. When they come over, they should have already prepared a medium-sized ferry, right? After more than 10 years, they should have sold all their belongings. It should be enough. Also, have you found out whether the cultivator guarding the anti-space beacon is at the mouth of the Hoku realm? That cultivator smiled. Don't worry, Senior Marshal Brother. How could I forget such an important matter? He's still at the Hoku Palace. 3 years ago, he went to the anti-space once. I estimate that the next time he goes there, it will take at least 7 or 8 years. These Changshuo cultivators are very lazy. They don't have any sense of responsibility. Chapter 1040. Don't be careless. Send a few brothers to guard the airspace outside Changsha. If he has the intention to go to the anti-space, stop him. Try to be peaceful and don't make a move. They had been wandering around Changshuo all these years, so they were not completely unaware of the personnel arrangement of Laojun Temple. Although they did not know that the guarding cultivators were not from Laojun Temple, they knew that cultivators who accepted such missions liked to stay in Hoku Palace. As long as they kept a close eye on him, they would be able to avoid being discovered. After making the arrangements, Third sat on the ferry and began to prepare to enter the anti-space. It took no less than 4 hours for the spatial passage to fully open. This time was much slower than Lu Xiaoyi's anti-space raft. Firstly, their financial resources were only able to obtain a raft of this quality. Secondly, due to the limitations of small rafts, it couldn't be compared to medium and large rafts. In terms of energy concentration, it was like heaven and earth. A truly powerful force's heavy weapon, a large-scale floating raft used to conquer the universe, opened a spatial passage in the span of a breath. After entering the anti-space, it was still eternal darkness and coldness. There were no signs of any living creatures. This was within Third Does expectations. After circling a few times and confirming that there were no abnormalities, they chose a direction and began to fly towards the depths. The rendezvous point they had agreed on was still a few days away. With a familiar brother leading the way, there would not be any mistakes. A few days later, a slightly larger meteorite appeared in their line of sight. They sent out a message from afar, but there was no response. They knew that the person had not arrived yet, so they were not anxious. They sat cross-legged on the meteorite and waited. The void of the universe was ethereal and boundless. Even for powerful cultivators, it was difficult to achieve a seamless connection in time. Most of the time, all they could do was wait and neutralize the countless strange changes that would affect their journey. Their advance party actually had a total of 13 people. 11 of them had transmigrated to the origin world, and 2 of them had returned to Heaven's Choice to lead the way. They did not need to worry about getting lost. What they needed to worry about were some other reasons, man-made reasons. In the Heaven's Choice mainland, ever since the collapse of the Great Tao, people's thoughts changed and the atmosphere cultivation underwent a subtle change. It was something that couldn't be described, something that couldn't be seen or touched. It couldn't even be accurately described, but it could be felt. It was a kind of uneasiness that was fermenting. Different realms would have different sources of uneasiness. People at their level wouldn't know what concerns the powerful half-immortals had. However, the true monarch's uneasiness came from the conflict between the Tao realms of the main and reverse worlds. This kind of conflict originally existed, but became sharper because of the changes in the Tao. To put it simply, a small boat was easy to turn around, but a large boat was difficult to turn around. To continue relying on the great Tao tablet system of the Heaven's Choice continent, or to go to the origin world and start all over again, was an extremely difficult choice. In reality, most of the monarchs chose to remain still. The Yuanning were the exact opposite. They were in the initial stages of establishing their own Tao realm system. Everything had just started and hadn't matured yet. Therefore, the Yuanning group was the group that desired to go to the origin world the most. Excluding the majority of those whose Tao hadn't collapsed yet, those who didn't want to advance, those who were hesitant, those who were watching from the sidelines, and so on, those who truly dared to walk out without hesitation were actually very few. The three virtues were one of them. There had to be a first batch to eat crabs. They might fail, but if they succeeded, they would have a much wider future. They were able to find the path to the origin world because they used some hidden channels that weren't suitable for public use. They couldn't be seen in public and also brought about some troubles. These connections that couldn't be cut off formed the various shapes and sizes of the cultivation world. 2 years later, a group of mid-sized floating rafts approached the falling star. After successfully communicating with them, a few Yuanying swayed out from the group and headed straight for the three virtues. Among them, 2 of them were the brothers that he sent back to lead the way. Everything seemed normal, but why are there so many people? Aren't there only cultivators from our Chu country? The three virtues was a little puzzled. One of the cultivators said bitterly, "The news has been leaked. Fortunately, the range isn't large. There are cultivators from the nearby Stone Country and Linchuan Country who want to join us. Senior brother, you know that it isn't easy to reject them. If we force them, there will inevitably be disputes and no one will be able to leave." However, they brought a mid-sized anti-space raft. As long as we embed the key we obtained, we can send a lot of people over at once. The three virtues asked, "You didn't manage to get a raft?" That cultivator shook his head. The price of the rafts in the Heaven's Choice continent has increased again. Even if we sell everything we have, we won't be able to afford it. The three virtues sighed. Since things had already come to this, there was no point in blaming them. Everyone was going to the origin world to seek the Tao. Since they were destined to walk on the same path, it was unrealistic to reject them now. How many people are there in total? 22 Yuanying and 100 Jindan. The three virtues clenched his teeth. There were too many people. They had to split up several times to pass through the space barrier. The mid-sized raft would cause a lot of commotion when passing through the space passage. The original plan was to have only the people from their Chu country to pass through the space passage in one go. After that, regardless of whether the origin world Changshuo had discovered them or not, everyone would leave Changshuo and look for a new world. Now, it seemed that they would have to take some risks. The cultivator's face was filled with hope. "Senior brother, three virtues, have you found a reliable place to stay in the origin world these years?" The three virtues shook his head. "The origin world is too big and the celestial bodies are too scattered. It is far beyond our imagination. These years, we have flown for several years at the furthest, but we haven't found a suitable celestial body. According to the people of Changshuo, there are very few celestial bodies that can be cultivated in this universe. Therefore, we still have to find one." He didn't say anything more. So what if they really found one? Since they could cultivate, there would be no lack of native cultivators on the celestial bodies. There would be conflicts. Who would be willing to let a group of outsiders occupy their precious resources? To fight or not to fight was the problem. If they fought, they didn't even have a true monarch. It was definitely impossible for them to enter the cultivation upper realm. They couldn't even enter the heaven and earth great membrane. If they didn't fight, they could only find a small or medium cultivation world. After going through so much trouble to come here, they changed from an environment rich in spiritual vigor to an inferior cultivation environment. They were unwilling to accept this. This was a trade-off. They might get a more comprehensive Tao realm environment, but they would lose the stable living conditions. To these Yuanying, it might not be too important, but to those Jin Dan disciples who followed them, it was a little cruel. He was a little regretful. He should have rejected these Jin Dan disciples from following them. He still thought too simply of the complexity of the problem. After all, the origin world and the Heaven's Choice continent were different. If you didn't experience these strange places, you would never know the difficulties. Get ready. It's useless to say anything more. Divide yourselves into groups and order yourselves. Don't fight over who goes first and who goes last. We're all strangers in a foreign land, so we should help each other. Chapter 1041. They were all people who held the great Tao of the main world in their hearts. Their common ideals caused them to avoid the usual disputes between cultivators. Not long after, everyone boarded a few ferries and moved forward. One of them was the mid-sized reverse space ferry controlled by Sanda. On it were dozens of stowaways from the first round. His gaze swept across the cultivators on the ferries. There were Yuanying, Jin Dan disciples, and among them were his grandchildren. This was the struggle of the people chosen by the heavens. The changes in the great Tao didn't only change in the Tao realm, but also in the human heart, who didn't want to find their place in the changing of the epic. In the darkness, the fairies approached the road sign, but Sanda's heart sank. Near the road sign, there were dozens of figures quietly floating there. They looked like they were welcoming them, but he knew that no one here welcomed them. After some communication, the Yuanying and the fairies all moved out, leaving behind a few guards to guard the ferries, especially the reverse space ferry that was leaning against the broken wall. The others followed him to welcome them. Senior Marshal Brother Huang, may I know why you are here? The universe is vast, and the last time we met was several decades ago. Senior Marshal Brother Huang is still the same, but I'm a little old. His attempt to curry favor didn't attract any goodwill from the other party. As cultivators from different countries in the Heaven's Choice continent, the difference in strength between both parties wasn't small. They were just casual acquaintances. If it involved non-core issues, they might be able to talk, but if they really met with trouble, the so-called fate of meeting a few times was nothing. The cultivator, surnamed Huang, frowned. Senior Marshal Brother Sanda, I didn't expect that the one who stole the secret of the road sign was actually someone from Chu country, crossing the space barrier so brazenly. The ignorant are truly fearless. You sure have guts. Sanda could tell that he didn't come with good intentions, but he couldn't flare up. Although he had more people on his side, the real experts were all in the main world. The remaining people were mostly Yuanying with average battle strength, not to mention the 100 Jin Dan disciples. To them, if they could solve a problem through negotiation, they had to talk in a soft voice. This wasn't the environment of the Heaven's Choice continent, where they could fight just because of a disagreement. Senior Marshal Brother Huang might not know, but our ferries and keys were bought from a third party. We don't know the source, and we didn't directly take it. So how can it be called stealing? The path to the origin world was the wish of many Heaven's Choice cultivators, but they couldn't do anything about it. There are a lot of real and fake deals like this, and we're just one of the luckier ones. Senior Brother Huang claims that the secret key is from your country. I dare not doubt it. However, we have a right to move freely. Senior Brother, please give us a way out on account that we are all members of the Heaven's Choice lineage. Also, please give us some face when we meet in the future. Senior Brother Huang, however, remained unmoved. He wouldn't reveal his true intentions, but these people had brazenly left the Changshuo space. Moreover, they had brought along their families, young and old. This had a huge impact on their Changshuo space's exit. If the origin world's great powers were to pay attention to this place, wouldn't they lose their only way out? It was impossible to find out how the news and the secret key had been leaked, but they had to block the leak to prevent it from happening. Heaven's Chosen blocked Heaven's Chosen's path, but left his master to the side. We have no intention of making things difficult for you. However, there's one thing. This path is blocked. It's not that we are unreasonable, but the key to this location is in our hands. Now that I have changed the key, do you think you will be able to continue crossing to the Changshuo region? Senior Brother Huang took out an item and stuck it on the road sign. After making some adjustments, he gestured with his hand. Third took out his own small floating raft and activated the spatial passage to gather energy. In the end, he discovered that if he could still pass through the spatial barrier, he might not be able to do so for the rest of his life. Because he had lost the correct dimensional coordinates, he couldn't find the shortest passage. His face turned ashen because this meant that Taoist Huang's side might really be the side that had the key to this location. Their information had all been leaked from an unknown place through a crooked channel. He had thought of many reasons for their failure, but most of them were about how the origin world's cultivators would make things difficult for them. However, he had never thought that the reason for their failure would be from the Heaven's Choice continent. We bought the information for everyone's future, and we didn't have any intention of offending your country. We didn't even know that the key came from your country's upper echelons. Since we have already come to this point, on account of the fact that we are from the same continent, can you let us go? We are willing to pay the price for this. This was a bit of a kowtow, but Third had no other choice. Even though he knew that the possibility was very small, he still had to give it a try. It was obvious that Taoist Huang's group had followed them here. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to explain why they would appear here so coincidentally. They were too greedy. They had already sent out more than 10 people, yet they still felt that it wasn't enough and wanted to bring out more. Being discovered by others was a very normal result. The only thing Third felt strange about was, why did Senior Brother Huang's group block them? What did it have to do with them? Leaving the Heaven's Choice continent would lessen the burden of the continent. Entering the Origin world also had nothing to do with them. The ones who should be worried should be the Origin world's cultivators, right? Senior Brother Huang was very resolute. This path is blocked. It's not a matter of favoritism. Third, you have also seen it. As long as I don't change the key back, you won't be able to pass through here no matter what. Let's go. We won't pursue the matter of the people who pass through, but it's impossible for the remaining people. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame yourself for being too greedy. It's already over, so why did you come back? Third finally confirmed. Senior Brother, you won't even give us a chance? Senior Brother Huang sneered. What? You want to snatch it? And I can also tell you that I won't destroy this thing because I still need to use it to restore the original key. If you think you have the ability, why don't you give it a try? Let me see, after all these years, how much progress have the cultivators of Chu country made? The cultivators beside Thirda were somewhat eager to give it a try, but Thirda was very clear in his heart that there was no hope. He had 23 Yuanying on his side, and their strength was uneven. Although the other side only had 12 people, they were all from Heaven's Choice country, Wu Marquis. Heaven's Choice country was a country guarded by half immortals. It couldn't be compared to a small country like theirs, where the Yuanying ruled. Moreover, this wasn't a simple matter of fighting. They had to snatch the key, and it would be best if they could kill them to keep their mouths shut. Otherwise, the majority of Chu country's cultivators who remained in Heaven's Choice country would be out of luck. This was a mission that simply couldn't be completed. Should they just go back like this? His heart was truly unwilling. Just as he was hesitating, a cultivator behind him shouted, "Fight or not? Retreat or not retreat? We came out to seek the great Tao with the heart of certain death. What is there to hesitate about? It's better to fight a battle than to regret it later. For this trip, I pawned off all my wealth, and it wasn't easy for me to gather enough resources to buy this anti-space raft. Could it be that I came here just to go around in circles in the universe?" The one who spoke was a Yuanying from Linchuan country. He was a true desperado. Since he had already come this far, how could he be willing to retreat? Of course, he believed in the principle of truth in the fist. Together with a few other cultivators from Stone country and Linchuan country, he rushed forward and directly started the battle. Chapter 1042. When Lin Chuan and Stone country Yuanying started fighting, there were naturally cultivators from Chu country who couldn't hold back. Seeing that the fight had turned into a mess, Third had no choice but to let everyone join the fight. They couldn't possibly let some people fight while others watched. They couldn't even reach left and right. Taoist Huang smiled coldly. He knew that this would be the result. They were actually really worried that these people would meekly submit and follow them back with their interference. If they really went back, would they be able to watch them every day? Their legs were on these people's bodies. Who knew when they would find a chance to run out again? The first time was unfamiliar. The second time was familiar. It was even harder to deal with. They might as well settle it once and for all in the universe. When they took the initiative to attack, they always felt like they were bullying others and being unreasonable. Now that the other party had made a move, it was like knocking on a pillow while sleeping. It couldn't be any better. When the battle started, Third's group had a huge advantage. After all, they had nearly double the number advantage, so they fought with great vigor. They knew each other's backgrounds and came from Heaven's Choice continent, so they had a deep understanding of each other. Therefore, it was hard to determine the victor in a short period of time, especially killing them. But in less than a moment, the situation took a turn. Several Yuanying from Third Dis side were killed. Wuhou country's Yuanying's advantage and foundation allowed them to slowly show their might after withstanding the opponent's surge. The worst thing was that the Three Virtues side couldn't judge the battle in advance. They even brought a few fairies with them, and on the fairies were some Jindan disciples who were too weak to stand up to a gust of wind. This became the weakness that they were afraid of, and Daoist Huang's group often used this weakness. In a real battle, they should leave the Jindan and fairies far away and fight to the death. But now, it wasn't easy to take care of both sides. They were passive everywhere, and the situation was quickly reversed. Third Dis heart was in great pain. He knew that he wasn't a good leader. When there wasn't a battle, he could still consider everything. But once the battle started, his hesitation brought about irreparable losses to the entire group. This loss was still increasing. What to do? They couldn't go to the origin world. Their companions fell one by one. The outcome of those Jindan was self-evident. The worst thing was that when the so-called fugitives from Lin Chuan and Stone Country saw that the situation was hopeless, they actually left without a care. Such despicableness had pushed Chu Nation's cultivators into the abyss. They could not run. There were still nearly 100 Jindan disciples. Those were their direct disciples, the most precious future of Chu country. The Three Virtues were about to fall into despair. It seemed that there was no other way except to fight to the death. He had thought about where he and his like-minded brothers would end up. He had thought about it for decades, but he had never thought that their final destination would not be out of the antimatter space. Born here, raised here, cultivated here, and died here. Could that be considered as having no regrets? Unlike the Yuanying from Lin Chuan and Stone Kingdom, these Yuanying from Chu Kingdom did not retreat. Even the Yuanying guarding the fairies joined in the battle. They knew very well that there was no point in running away. If they could not get out of the negative space, the only way to return was through fate. After doing such a big thing, they could not escape death. The tree has fallen, but the vines are still there? Well, they were brothers, and they came out with the purpose of fighting for their future. It was not bad to die together. As for their wishes, there were still 10 brothers left in the outside world to fulfill them. Hopefully, they would be smart enough to not die together with Daoist Huang's group if they chased after them. His heart was clear, and the burden was removed. He was able to use his techniques with ease. After fighting for a while, it seemed that there were no more losses to his companions. This was a bit strange. The Three Virtues finally had the mood and energy to make an overall judgment of the situation. He was the initiator of this operation to get out of the negative space, and he was the leader. He was usually generous and helpful to others, and he was very popular. Therefore, everyone was willing to respect him as the leader. However, he was not a good battlefield commander. His fighting spirit was unstable, and the battle was rushed, resulting in casualties. In just a few short moments, 5 of the 16 Yuanying from Chu country had died in this empty universe. However, he only wanted to fight with his life on the line, and there was nothing good about his overall strategy. It was not that he did not know himself, but that he was good at controlling the overall situation and was good at the Tao of space. When it came to the real battle, there were other people to organize it. However, those few strong men had stayed in the negative space and did not come over. He had placed his main force in the wrong place. Looking around with his divine sense, he felt that something was strange. Once a Yuanying battle began, the range would be very wide. If they did not form a formation, each person would have their own opponents, and each person would have their own movements. However, it was still within the range of his divine sense. What he felt strange about was that, including himself, 5 people had died, but there were still 12 people left. When facing the 12 people, they were evenly matched, but now that he counted, Daoist Huang's group only had 7 people left. Where did the other 5 go? Could it be that they went to chase after Lin Chuan and Stone Country's Yuanying? Wasn't that too arrogant? Of course, 7 out of 12 would be able to hold on for the time being. But the question was, who was the extra one? He felt strange, but there was someone even stranger than him on the battlefield. It was Daoist Huang. Their battle strategy did not include chasing after people who escaped. It was normal for one of their companions to fight a little further away, but it was very strange for all 5 of them to disappear after fighting for a while. He was not worried about any accidents, because during this period of time, there were only 5 cases of Dao phenomenon disappearance, and they were all caused by Chu Country's Yuanying. He saw this very clearly. The battlefield was still very chaotic. He could distinguish the approximate location with his divine sense, but he could not distinguish them one by one. This was the limitation of his divine sense. Once the strange change appeared, it suddenly sped up. There was no Dao phenomenon disappearance, but third virtue and Daoist Huang could clearly feel that the number of cultivators on the battlefield was still inexplicably decreasing. There were 19 people on both sides, but soon it became 18, 17, 15 people. Something strange had sneaked in. When there were only 15 people left, the battlefield became spacious and clear. As the divine sense intertwined, there would always be cultivators who saw the situation with their own eyes, gathering what they saw. Thus, one was surprised and the other was happy. Third virtue was happy because he did not know where the helper came from. Daoist Huang felt that a great disaster was about to befall him, because this troublemaker who had sneaked in did not cause Dao phenomenon disappearance, even after killing people. When there were only 3 people left in Daoist Huang's group, they had no choice but to gather together. Facing the enemy's encirclement of more than 10 people, they were very embarrassed. This was no longer a question of whether they could hold on, but Third Virtue's group was afraid that he would destroy the secret key in desperation, so they did not dare to kill him. It was already very difficult to escape. When a figure appeared in the encirclement, all the cultivators unconsciously stopped what they were doing. That was the respect for the strong, the belief in strength. In the cultivation world, this was the truth. Daoist Huang's group of 12 people, 9 of them were killed by this person, and he was the only master here. No one would say that, but no one would not think that. Chapter 1043. Lu Xiaoyi entered the battle circle, strolling leisurely as he stared at Daoist Huang. The 2 of you are fighting here. Have you forgotten the owner of this place? With one sentence, all the cultivators present understood. This was the cultivator guarding the Changshuo space waymark. Owner? What a ridiculous title. This was the anti-material space, not the main world. How could there be a main world cultivator as the owner? But this was the cultivation world. The one with the bigger fist was the owner. To the 2 groups, alerting the owner of the waymark was a very bad thing, especially such a powerful owner. Daoist Huang was still struggling. Fellow Daoist, why did you attack my Wuhou country? We are also controlling and sealing the space transition portal, which is beneficial to the main world. Lu Xiaoyi frowned. Speak carefully? If you continue to talk nonsense, I'm afraid you don't even have the qualifications to speak. Sealing the portal? So consider it. It's nothing more than controlling others for your own convenience. You are afraid that they're too ostentatious and attract the attention of the main world, which will cut off your own portal. He stretched out his hand. Give me the key. You dare to privately change the key. You really don't know what death is. If you ruin my Zhou Xian's important matter, even 10 of your lives won't be enough to fill it. Daoist Huang was very bitter. The situation was forced strength the owner. The key was that their key was indeed someone else's. This action was the owner's to recover the original object, not to plunder. Under many influences, he could not help but take out the key and hand it over. He thought in his heart, anyway, my Wuhou country still has this thing. It's not considered a leak, and it's not considered a loss. But he did not expect that the so-called owner in front of him was actually a guy with extremely low authority. He was trying to gain something without risking anything. Lu Xiaoyi did not dare to immediately restore the waymark because he was not familiar with this thing. He needed to try it out. If he tried it now, he would immediately show his cowardice. He had to maintain the posture of an expert. Can you tell me the reason? Taoist Huang understood what he meant. There were countless tacit agreements in the world of cultivation, including the one now. If Taoist Zhou Xian was willing to tell them the secret behind his back, he would let them live. If he insisted on keeping it a secret, the three of them would have to break out of the encirclement of the 10 people. After weighing the pros and cons, Taoist Huang clenched his teeth. The responsibility lies on my shoulders. Forgive me for not being able to speak my mind. Lu Xiaoyi nodded and retreated to the periphery. Then, the 11 Yuanying from Chu country began their final hunt. No matter how tolerant the three virtues were, they knew that the current situation was a situation where they would not rest until one of them was dead. Letting the three of them leave would be irresponsible to their Heaven's Choice song. Only by wiping out all three of them and not letting a single one of them escape was the correct decision. In an instant, the battle started again. This time it was 3 for people surrounding one person. No matter how powerful Wu Ho's inheritance was, it was not strong enough to cause a qualitative change. Not to mention that there was a seemingly leisurely, but actually ruthless fellow outside. Even though he wasn't making a move right now, as long as the three of them tried to escape, he would definitely make a move. There was no way out, only a life and death struggle. Lu Xiaoyi looked on coldly from the side. Even though the three virtues group of cultivators were dying under Taoist Huang's group, he did not have the slightest intention of making a move. Their problem was that he had already helped to kill 9 out of the 12 people. How could he continue to help? Helping here and there, the karma had already stained his body, but this group of people was not affected at all. There had to be blood. The remaining 3 people had to be killed by the 3 virtues. Only then would there be a basis for him to find out what they had in common. This battle, to him, was a battle that was not worth mentioning. With his explosive strength, if he mixed in with the 3 virtues to kill, no one would be able to block his sharpness. It was not that he wanted to act weak, but if he did not want to let a single one of the 12 people go, then he had to be a bit more ruthless in the early stages. Otherwise, with the 10 of them escaping in different directions, even if the entire inverse space was chasing after him, how would he be able to protect himself? He did not know how long he would have to stay here, so he could not be remembered by others and become the target of the inverse space's large powers. In the battle, he used a brand new skill for the first time. It was the combination of merit and Great Void's Tao realm. While it increased the power of the flying sword to a certain extent, it also had a heaven-defying function in the eyes of others, obliterating Tao phenomenon. To Lu Xiaoyi, who had carved sneak attacks into his bones, his powerful explosive strength and extremely talented tactical arrangements made his sneak attacks especially fierce. But there was a problem that could not be solved, which was that he could only sneak attack one person, because there was obliterating Tao phenomenon. After one person, he would definitely be noticed, and there was no solution. This problem began to change after he started to come into contact with merit in Great Void's Tao realm, and after decades of tireless effort, he formed a set of methods. The method was to use the Tao realm of merit to entrust the death of the opponent to the next life, and then use the Great Void's reality to simulate the world of the next life. In other words, the collapse of energy caused by obliterating Tao phenomenon still existed, but the method was changed, and it became the collapse of merit, and then the Great Void's Tao realm. This was not completely obliterating Tao phenomenon. If there was a Taoist who was proficient in merit and Great Void here, his trick would still be seen through. The problem was, there was no monk here, and no Taoist who was proficient in the Great Void's Tao realm. After Third Virtue's group finally killed Taoist Huang and the other 2, they lost another 2 people. This kind of battle strength really made people speechless. Although there was a factor of mutual destruction, 11 people against 3 still fought to this extent. Third Virtue awkwardly asked his brothers to disperse, clean up the battlefield, and destroy the corpses. He was also afraid that the guarding cultivator in front of him would misunderstand. Up until now, he still did not know the origin of this Taoist. He did not look like a Taoist of Lord Chang Shua's Taoist lineage, but he had shown his face during the expulsion of the main world's asteroid. Now, he was very glad that he had acted humble back then. Otherwise, those so-called experts he left behind in the main world would also not be able to resist this person's attack. Although he could not determine the origin of this person, he could vaguely feel that this person did not seem to have any evil intentions towards them, which meant that they might still have a chance. He walked forward alone and introduced himself cautiously. Anti-space Heaven's Choice Continents, Chu Country Sanda. This time, I want to pass through the main world because of the collapse of the Great Tao, and the people's hearts are in chaos. I only want to walk on my own path of Tao, and I have no desire to win, nor have I been ordered by anyone, and I have a hidden agenda. The road sign is guarded by fellow Taoists, and passing through without notice is an original sin. My ability is limited, and there is nothing I can do. Fellow Taoist, saving me is equivalent to a disaster, and you are also in charge of the key to the road sign. As for where we go, it is up to you to decide. I just want to know, if there is really a way to pass through the main world, what do we have to pay? Lu Xiaoyi came back to his senses from studying the key. You don't have to pay anything. I'm not guarding this place to collect toll fees. But there is one thing I ask and you answer. Honesty is the best reward. Chapter 1044. I'll tell you everything I know, Santa said solemnly. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. The origin world welcomes friends from all over the world. I'm not qualified to say this, but I think this is the attitude of most cultivators in the origin world, just like how we can frequently travel to and from the anti-material space. Power is mutual. The reason why you're not used to traveling to and from the origin world is because you haven't developed such a habit. Flying in the origin world will take a longer detour. The cosmic phenomena are more dangerous, and the relationship between cultivation domains is more complicated. This is partly because of us, but it's also partly because of you. What I said is true, right? Senda nodded. In fact, there was a big truth that this Taoist didn't say, which was that the cultivation power of the origin world was stronger and more aggressive. Lu Xiaoyi continued. I've never heard of any universe or domain that has a restriction that prohibits anti-space cultivators from entering the origin world. Since you don't take the initiative, you can't blame others for being restricted by others when using the spatial mark. You have to pay the price for being isolated. This is also the principle of the cultivation world in the universe. Santa nodded bitterly. What he said was the truth, but the difficulties in it were not enough for outsiders to know. There were many practical reasons. If they didn't isolate themselves, would they still be Heaven's Choice? Perhaps they would have already become a domain in the origin world. Of course, to achieve this, not only did it require the efforts of countless generations of people, but it also required a more open mind. How could it be easy? Perhaps it could be changed by the collapse of the Great Tao? Fellow Taoist, you're right. The people of Heaven's Choice are stubborn and don't dare to go out of the space, so they can't blame anyone for their current predicament. Lu Xiaoyi went straight to the point. Can you let me take a look at your anti-space raft? I'd like to see what kind of authority the key you bought from Heaven's Choice is. My Zhou Xian's anti-space spatial mark was actually reduced to information that can be bought and sold by Heaven's Choice. It's really surprising. Santa took out his small anti-space raft without hesitation and handed it over to this powerful and unfathomable Taoist. This was a bet. After the other party obtained the ferry, it was possible that they would take it for themselves. After all, this thing was extraordinarily precious. Even a small country like Chu Country could only afford to buy this ferry with the entire country's resources. They could not even gather the resources for a second ferry. However, he was still willing to take the risk, not only because of the Taoist strength, but also because of the convincing aura he naturally exuded. If he took it out, they might still have a chance to cross to the main world. If he didn't take it out, without the guidance of the road sign, what was the point of keeping the raft? Lu Xiaoyi sat down in the cabin of the raft and carefully felt it. He felt very uncomfortable. Among the three powers, Priest Wang's key was the most powerful one. Not only could it guide the direction of the negative space, it also had the right to change the navigation mark. Secondly, Third Da had bought a complete set of the fairy raft with the key. He didn't have the right to modify it, but he had the right to block the perception of other users. In other words, Third Da might not know that Third Da was using this set of coordinates, but Third Da would definitely know that Third Da was using this set of coordinates. The worst one was his raft, which was the lowest level of authority among all the navigation marks. He was the guardian cultivator of Zhou Xian, so he was using it as a maintenance worker, but he also had advantages. For example, he had the maintenance manual of the road sign provided by the sect. If he combined the manual with the three powers of the key and studied it carefully, he might be able to completely solve the mystery of the navigation mark's authority. At that time, he would have to get himself the most powerful one. The key was the key of the raft. The road sign was the lock. Under normal circumstances, even if a cultivator had such a negative space raft, he wouldn't be able to solve the secret of the key, because he had no clue, because there were countless answers, just like a multivariate equation. Because there were too many variables and unknowns, he couldn't solve them. But now, he had three multivariate equations. His was the one with the lowest authority, Third Da's was the one with the middle authority, and Priest Wang's was the one with the highest authority. He might even have a fourth multivariate equation, such as the one with the empty valley. With so many prerequisites, it didn't seem difficult to find the mystery of the key to the road sign. I need to borrow your raft for a while to determine whether the key on it was copied or leaked by Zhou Xian. During this period, you can use your medium-sized raft to transport people. Is there a problem? This was just an excuse. In fact, Lu Xiaoyi was very sure that this couldn't be the key to crack it. It could only be deliberately leaked by someone with ulterior motives. But this was Zhou Xian's dirty linen, and it couldn't be made public. Besides, if Third Da and the others knew about it, it wouldn't do them any good. Third Da finally let out a sigh of relief. It wasn't easy to see the light at the end of the tunnel, but he still had to be careful. My fellow cultivator, so many of us are going to the airspace of Changsha. Will it cause any misunderstandings? Lu Xiaoyi said generously, well, I'll send you off and say hello to Laojun Temple. Third Da went to organize people to cross over to the origin world. Lu Xiaoyi used Third Da's small raft to come to Changsha. After communicating with Kong Gu, the tolerant people of Changsha didn't make things difficult for this group of people. It was fine as long as they didn't stay in the vicinity of Changsha. While he was at it, he borrowed Kong Gu's reverse space raft and returned to the reverse space navigation mark. After trying it out, he found that his raft really didn't have the lowest authority, because Kong Gu's was even lower than his. With 4 different keys, he could try to crack the navigation mark. When Third sent everyone to the origin world, it was already several hours later. Lu Xiaoyi also finished his research and personally returned the raft. Third was very embarrassed. He wanted to give his thing away, but he really couldn't. This was his only way to return to Heaven's Choice Continent, and he didn't know when he could use it. Without the help of my fellow cultivator, Chu country's cultivators would have been completely wiped out. I can't repay your kindness. My fellow cultivator's skills are unparalleled, and your future is limitless. It's not something that I can compare to. Third, that doesn't make empty promises here. Thinking about it, the only thing that can help you is everything related to Heaven's Choice Continent. Third's eyes flashed with a strange light as he handed over a few things. This is everything related to Heaven's Choice Continent. Its location, how to enter and exit, how to prove your identity. It's all here. Tens of thousands of years ago, Heaven's Choice Continent was still a forbidden area for most of the cultivators in the origin world. Those who weren't half immortal couldn't enter. Tens of thousands of years ago, true monarchs could enter and exit freely. Now, even us Yuanian can fulfill our lifelong wish as long as we are willing to think of a way. Thinking about it, it's all because of the collapse of the Great Tao and the Heavenly Tao. Heaven's Choice Continent is a good place to travel and broaden your horizons. If my fellow cultivator has the mood, you could go take a look. The sky is high and the universe is deep. Cultivation is boundless. Take care. May we meet again. Chapter 1045. Sanda led his brothers and disciples from Chu country to search for a new world. He didn't make any requests to Lu Xiaoyi. In fact, Lu Xiaoyi didn't have the ability to find a place for them to return to. He was still far from being able to point his finger at other people's cultivation path. He didn't have a suitable place to settle these people down, and he couldn't do so. They had to walk their own path, whether it was good or bad. They should have thought about these problems when they rushed into the main world. They didn't need to be taught. After sending off Sanda and the others, Lu Xiaoyi returned to the Waymark. At this time, he had completely grasped the basic theory of the Changshuo Waymark. With his strict logical thinking ability, sufficient keys, and the convenience of being a Waymark keeper. But what he didn't know was whether the Changshuo Waymark and the other Waymarks were arranged according to a set of theories, or were they different. This needed to be verified one by one in the future. Because the people of Chu country were beside them, it wasn't easy for them to do anything. Now that they were alone, of course, he could do whatever he wanted. He compared the analyzed keys with the waymarks one by one and figured out the differences between them. This was also a kind of ability that could be used at a critical moment. The lowest authority of the Empty Valley could only enter and exit the main and reverse worlds at the Changshuo Waymark, but he couldn't use it to travel long distances in the reverse space. This was because his fairy couldn't sense any Waymark relay points other than Changshuo. Lu Xiaoyi's second lowest authority allowed him to freely enter and exit the main and reverse worlds of the Waymark. He could also sense the information of the Waymark in the direction of Zhou. In other words, he could now accurately find the way to Zhou in the reverse space, but he couldn't find any other places. The middle-level authority of Sanda allowed him to enter and exit the main world of Changshuo without leaving any traces on the Waymark. Of course, this avoid was for people with lower authority than him. There were only two Waymarks. One was in Changshuo, and the other was in an unknown place far away. Sanda told him that it was the Heaven's Choice Continent. With Taoist Huang's higher authority, he could change the direction of the spatial mark to a certain extent, mainly for those with lower authority than him. In addition, when he used Taoist Huang's secret key, he could feel that with the spatial mark as the center, there was a location that was similar to the other location of the three virtues, and that was the Heaven's Choice Continent. Lu Xiaoyi immediately realized that there must be a key with a higher authority. Otherwise, if the people from Zhou wanted to travel a long distance through the relay point, how could they not sense the other relay points here? He could now switch back and forth between the four ready-made key authority levels, but that was not enough. What he wanted to do was to derive a higher level of authority, or even the highest level of authority. Only in this way could he discover some of the hidden truth behind it. This required time, and it required constant failure to correct. This was also the reason why he had stopped here. His mind sank into the complicated derivation. He was not in a hurry, and did not forget to eat and sleep. He only spent 4 hours every day on this derivation. During this time, he could not help but learn some corresponding spatial knowledge. While deepening his spatial realm, he could also decipher the mystery of the secret key. A year later, Lu Xiaoyi habitually embedded the newly derived secret key into the raft formation. He had already done this procedure hundreds of times, but this time was different. When a secret key was embedded into the raft formation, he could clearly feel the existence of 3 points. Other than the Changshuo relay point and Zhou starting point, there was another point. It was also not the location of the Heaven's Choice Continent that he remembered, but a brand new waymark. He smiled faintly. There was nothing to be happy about. It was within his expectations. It was just time. Moreover, he did not think that this was a success. As a system, as a great domain that had existed for hundreds of thousands of years in the three-dimensional environment of the universe, there should not be only 3 points. This did not conform to a cultivator's instinct to constantly explore the void of the universe. It could only be said that it was a partial success, a beginning. He could start from here until more waymarks of relay points appeared in his perception. This was the discovery of the secrets of the faction as a spy, and also the best practice of spatial knowledge. It was also the capital to survive in the negative space in the future, and also the beginning of finding the way home. There was nothing that could be obtained for free. If these things were directly told to him by a big shot, he would lose the process of becoming stronger in the process of discovering them. In the Yuaniing realm and above, the strength of a cultivator was not only limited to the cultivation techniques and sword techniques that people were familiar with, but also included many other things, comprehensive things. With a beginning, it meant that he was walking on the right path. The deciphering became faster and faster, and new waymarks were discovered one after another. Finally, a year later, with the Changshuo relay point as the center, he discovered a total of 13 new waymarks. They were like a sphere that surrounded Changshuo in different directions. If converted to the distance of the main world, they were probably several universes away. This was the true heritage of the upper realm of Zhou Xian, which had been passed down for hundreds of thousands of years. It was the result of countless cultivators rushing about in the void of the universe for their entire lives. With this system, Immortal Zhou would be able to project his power over a very long distance in a relatively short period of time. In the origin world, a nascent soul cultivator might not be able to reach such a distance even if they flew for their entire life with a flying boat. He was sure that he had completely deciphered the key, because in the next few months, no matter how he modified the key, no new waymarks appeared. Yes, the 13 directions were all different, and with this as the starting point, they spread out in all directions in the void of the universe. 3 years of hard work finally yielded results, but Lu Xiaoyi could not bring himself to congratulate him, because the iron law of the cultivation world was that the more you knew, the more ignorant you felt. The waymark system could be sensed, but questions followed one after another. How far did the waymark system of Zhou Xian extend? Was it far enough for him to go home? Of the 13 new waymarks, which one was the correct path to the 5 rings of the blue sky? It was almost impossible to use the elimination method to test this, because every elimination attempt required him to spend a lot of time on a trip. Even if he had the time, what if another 10 or so choices appeared at the next waymark? What should he do? Exponential trial and error. There was also good news. With his current authority, he could track the use of the waymarks. In other words, he could clearly know the use of the waymarks in the past through the records hidden in the waymarks. This included the number of times he entered and exited the main world. This included the waymark of Changshuo and the location of the next waymark. This rekindled his hope. Chapter 1046. Lu Xiaoyi attached great importance to this new function of the road signs. This meant that he could trace the whereabouts of those organized stowaways, such as the anti-space cultivators who had a purpose like Taoist Huang. He could not help but suspect that a certain force in Zhou Xian had secretly leaked the information of the road signs to the organization of the anti-space in order to let them come to the main world for a unique trip. There must be a purpose, and for this purpose, they would even step forward to stop stowaways like Taoist Sanda, just to not arouse the suspicion of the Changshuo domain. The clues were very clear, and the direction was clear, but when he really went deeper, he found that the records of the road signs he could trace back were only within the range of a few decades. He had been here for less than 20 years, and Senior Brother Ko had been guarding here for 50 years. In other words, the records of the road signs he could trace back were all records when the road signs were guarded by the carefree travel cultivators. Of course, nothing could have happened, because the carefree travel cultivators did not really participate. What he wanted to trace back was a further time clue. For example, 70 years ago, did the Bodhisattva of the Bitter Zen Temple pass by during the 100 years he was guarding here? It was not that there were no records of the road signs. The records of the road signs could be in the range of infinite time, but the problem was that it required a certain degree of time, Tao realm, to be able to decipher it. After going around in circles, the problem returned to the starting point. His realm was not enough, his cultivation time was not enough, and his grasp of the Tao realm was not deep enough. It was a painful cultivation. Lu Xiaoyi left the anti-space. He needed to go to the human world to change his mood, shoot away those troubles, and do some happy things. Did you find anything? Supreme Kongu smiled. After those stowaways left, he felt very relaxed. In the process, he learned more about this young Zhou Xian Jr. At the very least, he knew that he was a very responsible person. In this fickle cultivation world, there were not many cultivators who were so diligent. Some, but there are too many bottlenecks. When dealing with these stowaways, it's hard to figure out their pattern, and even harder to figure out the source of the road signs they can use. Everything is unclear. My authority is low, I'm not proficient in space, and I don't understand time. It seems that I've overestimated my abilities. Lu Xiaoyi was half real and half fake. It was impossible for him to completely fool the old man, but the old man could not have known that he could crack the secret key to such an extent. The old man could only attribute the incident to a group of inexplicable stowaways who climbed over the wall at the Changshuo relay point. That way, everyone would be more relaxed. Kongu laughed. Little friend Dan, aren't you in too much of a hurry? A person's age and cultivation level would determine their cultivation level. You already know everything that you need to know, so what's the point of being serious? Was it just retirement? However, I didn't expect that little friend would be so lenient and compassionate towards that group of people. It's commendable. On this point, Lu Xiaoyi had nothing to hide. There was no need to. I'm here to maintain the beacon, not to guard the spatial tunnel. Since he didn't receive this salary, he didn't need to worry about it. Moreover, I don't think that such a group of people can affect the origin world. The most important thing for them to do after coming here is to survive. In terms of threat, they can't even compare to those space pirates wandering in the void. True Lord Kongu laughed. You're quite open-minded, good. In fact, I've always thought the same. Whether it's the cultivators of the origin world going to the negative space or the people of heaven's choice coming to the origin world, it's nothing more than a kind of communication, just like the many realms in the origin world. Lu Xiaoyi was a little curious. Senior, I've heard them talk about this place called Heaven's Choice Mainland. Now that I've heard you talk about it, I wonder if you've been to this place? What does this continent look like? It seems like no one has ever mentioned it before. Even the sect's ancient records don't have the slightest bit of information about it. Kongu fell in a deep thought. After a long time, he said, the matter of Heaven's Choice Mainland is very unfamiliar to the cultivators of the origin world. At least in Changshuo, my senior brothers and I have never heard of such a continent in the negative space. We have always thought that the negative space is a barren land for cultivators, without any cultivation realms. As for when this vague information began to appear, there's no exact time. If you want to guess, it's probably slowly appearing after the collapse of fate. However, it was also vague and ambiguous until the merit collapsed and dissipated. After the collapse of merit, there's a lot of information about this. Because of the changes in the Great Tao, some cultivators of the negative space began to come out, and more cultivators of the origin world went in. The flow of people increased, and some things couldn't be hidden anymore. With the arrival of chaos, the cultivators didn't have so many rules. Recently, after the collapse of the Great Tao of Void, I was lucky enough to get close to the cultivators of Heaven's Choice for the first time. This is a little far for Zhou Xian, because you guys are too strong. No cultivators of Heaven's Choice would choose to appear in the airspace near Zhou Xian. Of course, they would choose to appear in places like Changshuo, where they can come and go freely. In less than 200 years, I've coincidentally met two cultivators of Heaven's Choice. They were all alone, and they were true monarchs. However, they didn't come in groups like this time. Yuaning cultivators dared to come out to the origin world, so I didn't realize it at first. I'm really slow. Kongu sighed. Yuaning cultivators even dare to come out. This means that the collapse of the Great Tao has a very deep impact on the Heaven's Choice continent. The cultivators of the origin world are still fine, other than desperately gathering spiritual opportunity, searching for fragments of the Great Tao, and fighting more frequently. The other changes haven't completely worsened. However, the cultivators of Heaven's Choice can't sit still, because the Great Tao appears in the form of a Great Tao tablet. In the eyes of the cultivators, it's even more shocking. It's as if the sky is about to collapse, and they have the desire to find a safer and more hopeful world. This is the motivation for them to come out and take the risk. However, I'll be honest with you, whether they come out or not, there's probably no difference in terms of opportunities. The only difference is in their mood. A wider space, more cultivators, a bigger stage. But it also means more difficult competition, and even more cruel reality. For example, can Third Virtue and the others find a cultivation planet that belongs to them? How is that possible? In the end, the best outcome is to be able to find a domain that can accommodate them. The greater possibility is that they'll just lose everything while drifting in the universe. Lu Xiaoyi nodded and didn't say anything. This was the truth. He couldn't help, and Konggu couldn't help either. He couldn't let the already limited resources of Changshuo have an additional group of greedy cultivators. Moreover, Third Virtue and the others might not be willing. Some walls had to be knocked down before they would be satisfied. Some rivers had to be jumped down before they knew if they could climb back up. This wasn't something that could be changed with just a few words of persuasion. If this was really the case, these people wouldn't have the courage to barge into the origin world to find their future. Chapter 1047. If it's just unorganized individual behavior or small group behavior, it's actually nothing. Lu Xiaoyi saw it this way. Konggu shook his head. Every time there's a natural disaster or famine in the mortal world, there's bound to be people, not to mention cultivators. In order to achieve their own goals, they'll deliberately mislead others and take advantage of the situation to rise up. In a normal cultivation world, there's no place for them to survive, but in a chaotic world, all kinds of monsters will jump out. This is a rare stage for them to fish in troubled waters. So how can they remain pure? Just watch. There will be more and more people like this in the future, and groups like the Three Virtues will become fewer and fewer. The Heaven's Choice continent is also a part of the universe. Even if the Great Tao collapses, why would it become a place for everyone to escape? Do they have so little confidence in their homeland? Konggu smiled. The people inside want to come out, and the people outside want to go in. Just like you, didn't you also want to go to the Heaven's Choice continent to take a look? Will you treat that place as an eternal cultivation place? They're the same. After a lot of experiences, I'm afraid most of them will return to the Heaven's Choice continent. The only difference is, how much time do they need to understand this principle? Lu Xiaoyi asked with a smile. Senior, are you not interested in going to the Heaven's Choice continent to take a look? You must know that in the cultivation world 10,000 years ago, only half immortals had the ability to enter the Heaven's Choice continent. Konggu nodded. I will go, but I have to wait for the right time. The number of cultivators in the Heaven's Choice continent is far less than the main world, but they are more concentrated. That continent not only has Yuanying true monarchs, they're also half immortals. A true monarch like me will only be an ordinary person there. So, I have to be careful. Especially you, although you're curious, you can't decide your actions because of curiosity. Just like the Three Virtues, courage is courage, but what can they do in the main world? What's their status? Similarly, with your current realm, going to the Heaven's Choice continent will only be worse. Why don't you wait and see? Lu Xiaoyi nodded. He was indeed very interested in the Heaven's Choice continent, but he didn't have any plans to go there in the near future. In fact, before he became a true monarch, he wouldn't have such plans. In a completely unfamiliar environment, he didn't know what he could do there. If he was still as flirtatious as he was in the origin world, no one would be able to tolerate him. Mingling in the circle of one's own realm and not rashly trying to climb up was the key to living a long life. He was a spy. Now, it might have become a double-sided case. His mission was to deliver accurate information to the right people and not to stop or settle things himself. This was self-awareness, and it was his principle. The days began to become dull again. Fortunately, there was still the empty valley. This was the first Supreme that he had a deeper understanding of since he started cultivating. The funny thing was that this person was not in his real sect in the fifth ring, blue sky, nor was he in his second sect, in Josien. Instead, he was a Supreme of a small force that was isolated outside the universe. Fate was very strange. The orthodoxy of Laojun Temple was never good at fighting, but it was precisely because of their tolerance that they were the most suitable location to set up a relay point. He didn't know why they chose Changshuo back then. Was it because of Changshuo that they set up a relay point, or was it because of the relay point that Changshuo existed? The history of cultivation was vague, and many things had already lost their truth. However, the orthodoxy of Laojun Temple still had a set of Taoist inheritances. In the frequent exchanges with true monarch Empty Valley, Lu Xiaoyi benefited a lot. It could be considered an unintentional gain. He didn't know how many years he would have to stay here. Perhaps there would be someone to replace him soon, but there wasn't. At most 30 years, it would be the turn of the human sex cultivators to guard the coordinates. At the level of Yuanying, this kind of time wasn't considered too long. With a senior like Empty Valley, he could give advice, and cultivation wouldn't be so boring. Lu Xiaoyi still spent most of his time on the small meteorite beside the coordinates in the reverse space. It was very empty here, and was a good place for cultivators to immerse themselves in the realm of Tao. In such an arduous cultivation, a small change caught his attention. Void beasts. He found traces of void beasts. Creatures like void beasts were a special species in the void of the universe. Whether it was the main world or the reverse space, they could be found everywhere. They were different from humans. Human cultivators needed a celestial body and a realm to pass down their orthodoxy and learn, and only then could they reproduce. However, void beasts didn't need a celestial body or a nest. They were like fish in the sea. At most, they would have a range of habitual appearances, but they wouldn't stick to a certain place, and they wouldn't dig holes to build nests. In the main world, Lu Xiaoyi rarely encountered void beasts when he was traveling. This was because the current era was no longer the beginning of the universe, and the outer space didn't only belong to the void beasts. In the space where there were frequent human activities, void beasts slowly retreated from the stage of the universe. Simply put, a universe like Zhou, where human cultivators flourished, was basically a forbidden area for void beasts. They could clearly smell the scent of humans in the universe, and thus avoided them. However, in those barren universes, where there were few or no signs of human cultivators, they would become a paradise for void beasts. Relatively speaking, among the 100 universes, less than 10% of the universes where human cultivators flourished. Therefore, in a sense, void beasts were still the rulers of the universe. The reverse space was a little different from the main world. This was because the Heaven's Choice continent was the only human cultivator's realm in the reverse space. The rest were the space territories of void beasts. They were free and unrestrained, and they didn't have to worry about encountering those savage and cunning humans at all times. After guarding near the coordinates for nearly 20 years, Lu Xiaoyi could count the number of void beasts he saw with his fingers. It wasn't that they were rare, but the reverse space was too big. It was so big that encountering them by chance became a kind of fate. Recently, Lu Xiaoyi discovered that the number of void beasts moving around the coordinates had increased. In the past, he would occasionally pass by one in a few years, but now he could see a few in a year. The most important thing was that these void beasts didn't go far. Instead, they were pacing back and forth in a huge area near the coordinates, as if they were waiting for something. This situation had been like this for several years. There were also 1 to 20 void beasts in this area that were pacing back and forth, which made him feel that something was a little unusual. His observation was very detailed. When these void beasts passed by the coordinates that were disguised as meteorites, they didn't show any abnormal reactions. In view of the void beast's intelligence, they were more used to acting on instinct. If they didn't show any interest in the coordinates, then they definitely didn't discover anything. At the same time, the void beast didn't show any vigilance towards the small meteorite that he was hiding in. Although Lu Xiaoyi was very confident in his own concealment ability, his so-called concealment was only for humans. It might not be perfect for the true aboriginals of the universe. The reason why they didn't discover him was most likely because most of these void beasts were at the level of Jindan. There were only a few Yuanying beasts. If a true Lord-level void beast appeared, he might not be able to hide. Chapter 1048. Lu Xiaoyi found an opportunity to return to the main world. He lacked experience in dealing with void beasts, so he could only ask for advice from Supreme Kongu. Void beasts? I don't know much about them. My limited understanding is based on the behavior of void beasts in the main world. The contact with void beasts in the anti-space is limited. You also know that I haven't been to the anti-space many times, and the time is very short. Why? Are you worried that other than the cultivators in the anti-space, you are also worried that void beasts will escape to the main world? Lu Xiaoyi nodded. It's just a guess. I can't see any signs at all. It's more like a sign. Of course, it could also be because of some other species that we humans don't know about. Kongu pondered. In the historical records of cultivation, the gathering of void beasts is not a rare thing. Of course, I'm talking about void beasts in the main world. I've never heard of anyone in the cultivation world, or any orthodoxy, who would study void beasts in the anti-space, even those orthodoxies who control beasts. Void beasts are generally a solitary species. They have different roots and origins. There are very few groups of void beasts that live in groups. Even if there are, they usually don't gather together, but are scattered in a certain area of the sky. When there is nothing to do, they go their separate ways and gather together. They don't have a fixed king. Just like the beast groups in the mortal world, there will always be new and stronger void beasts that challenge the old king and obtain a certain amount of time to dominate. In this aspect, the nature of beasts is not much different from that of ordinary beasts. There's no assembly, no system, and no strict organization. It's hard for us humans to figure out which one of them has the greatest authority, but there's one thing for sure. The higher the realm of the void beast, the greater the authority it has. There's no mistake about that. Kongu thought for a while. For humans, most of the recorded phenomena of void beast gathering are beast tides. It's a kind of situation that humans don't understand that causes the group of void beasts to become irritable, crazy, and irrational. In this aspect, they have something in common with ordinary beasts. For example, tides, migration, refuge, and so on. But the beast tides of void beasts are more likely to be caused by large-scale meteorological outbreaks. Lu Xiaoyi frowned. Senior, do you think there's a possibility that the anti-space void beasts have also sensed the collapse of the great Tao and the change of the heavenly Tao, and are instinctively agitated under the sense of danger? Kongu said solemnly. I was just about to say that. This was very likely. Due to the fact that beasts had sharper instincts than humans, it was entirely possible for them to sense the changes between heaven and earth. It was just like how all the fish in the nearby sea would flee before a volcano erupted in the sea. But what we don't know is where they can run to. The Great Tao has collapsed, and the negative space is the same everywhere, unless... Lu Xiaoyi sighed and continued. Unless we escape to the origin world. That was why they were hovering near the road signs. Because they can use their beast instincts to know where the spatial barrier is the thinnest. Kongu was speechless. This kind of thing shouldn't be his concern, and he couldn't do anything about it. In the future, there would be many such changes in heaven and earth, and it wasn't something that could be controlled by humans. His most important responsibility was to protect his own domain from being invaded by external forces. If, and I'm saying if, if the abnormality of the void beasts is really because of this reason, if they can really break through the spatial barrier and come to the origin world, will it have a direct impact on Changsha, which is close by? Kongu hesitated. In theory, it shouldn't be. I've heard of humans invading a certain domain, and there are insects or other alien races. But in history, I've never heard of void beast invading a human cultivation domain. Not to mention a cultivation domain, they won't even enter an ordinary mortal domain. Otherwise, how can the fragile humans reproduce and grow in the universe? Humans will die if they go into the void, because unless they reach a certain level, the void is a death zone for humans. Similarly, void beasts also avoid the atmosphere like a tiger, just like how fish won't fly in the sky and birds won't swim in the water. That is the most fundamental of core instincts, which is why I believe that even if void beasts from the negative space managed to break out of the main space barrier, the place they would yearn for the most would be the vast void of the main world, and not the worlds with humans and atmospheres. When humans come to the origin world, their biggest enemy is the cultivators of the origin world. When the void beasts come to the origin world, their biggest enemy is not humans, but those native void beasts of the origin world. In a sense, killing one's own race is always more important than repelling another race. Of course, if a large number of void beasts appear near Changsha, no one can guarantee that there won't be any. Lu Xiaoyi smiled bitterly. Troubled times were coming, and there would be many strange things like this in the future. There was nothing he could do. If he could let Rin Sandy and the others enter the origin world, there was no reason for him to stop these creatures of the universe. It didn't make sense, and he might not be able to stop them. Just watching them like this was also a way to pass the time when he was bored. What he wanted to figure out was, if his guess was right, what method would these creatures of the universe use to break through the spatial barrier? Would they use the human's navigation mark? Now, these void beasts couldn't sense the existence of the navigation mark, but it didn't mean that the higher-level void beasts couldn't sense it. After bidding farewell to Taoist Kongu, Lu Xiaoyi returned to the negative space. The moment he appeared, he felt some kind of slightly hostile gaze. It was two Yuaning-level void beasts, and they happened to pass by near the navigation mark and bumped into each other. Lu Xiaoyi quietly looked at the two void beasts. He didn't draw his sword, because the consequence of drawing his sword would be that he would be driven out of this area by the endless waves of void beasts. Even if he could kill them without causing any phenomena, it was best not to play those tricks in front of these void beasts who relied on their instincts to survive. He was very sure that as long as he killed any void beast here, he would become the public enemy of all the void beasts here. He didn't try to communicate, because he didn't know how to do so. Different species had different habits. Humans might think that they were kind, but the void beasts might not. In the beast-tamer orthodoxy of the humans, not all void beasts could be tamed. They were only a part of it, and a small part at that. They would also try their best to find those void beasts that were young and not mature void beasts. That was basically hopeless, but at least Lu Xiaoyi knew that his aura couldn't be weak. To this kind of instinctive beast, if he appeared too weak, they would think that he was weak and easy to bully and would treat him as food. But he couldn't let them feel that he was on the verge of being attacked. This would also trigger a battle. For this reason, he carefully balanced himself. Other than showing that his aura was not weaker than the other parties, he didn't make any extra movements. He just quietly stared at the other party, as if this was his territory. He didn't know how long this could last, and whether he could maintain a relatively peaceful relationship. He had to give it a try, and if it really didn't work, he would make his move. He didn't want to leave this place, because he wanted to know what the void beasts would do when they gathered together. Chapter 1049. This kind of confrontation ended after a period of time. The two void beasts reluctantly left the vicinity of the spatial marker. It was not that they thought that Lu Xiaoyi was their kind, but they knew that it would not be easy to swallow this strange creature in front of them. Looking at the two void beasts leaving resentfully, Lu Xiaoyi smiled bitterly and shook his head. He knew why the void beasts did not eat him immediately. It was because his body that was reconstructed by the small universe emitted a trace of aura that was compatible with the universe. It was also an aura that was similar to the void beasts of the universe. It was impossible for humans to have this kind of aura because humans were born in the mother's body and grew up in the atmosphere. They had an innate aura. This kind of aura could not be felt by humans, but to the void beasts, it was the source of their anger. It was like how in his previous life, when Europeans and Americans heard about Asians, they would always smell like soy sauce. But when Asians heard about Europeans and Americans, they would smell like mush. This kind of difference would remind them of the difference between the two races. In this world of cultivation, when the void beasts acted on instinct, it was the beginning of a massacre. Fortunately, the worst result was avoided. However, he was not naive enough to think that the void beasts would treat him as their kind, just because he had the unique aura of the universe's creatures. In their hearts, he was just a strange human. Maybe he was not that big of a threat. These things could even be eaten by their own kind. Therefore, he continued to bury himself in the small meteorite. While comprehending the Tau realm, he observed the rare gathering of the void beasts. He had never seen a beast tide before. The number of void beasts increased, and they gathered faster and faster. There were so many that there were at least a few void beasts wandering around the spatial marker. This also meant that from now on, Lu Xiaoyi could no longer return to the Changshuo region of the main world, because the 2-hour preparation time would inevitably be interrupted by curiosity or malice. The large void beasts also began to appear. It was a monarch-level ray monster. It had a flat body, a long tail fin, and a pair of bulging eyes. It looked exceptionally ferocious. However, although this ray monster's aura was strong, it was not stable. It should have just become a monarch. In view of the fact that human cultivators were generally stronger than beasts and spiritual treasures, Lu Xiaoyi was not afraid of it. What he was afraid of was a human, a man riding on the back of a ray monster. After cultivating for more than 800 years, he had always thought that the legendary scene where a flute sound could summon a swarm of beasts was just a fabrication made up by ignorant mortals. Perhaps for ordinary beasts without spiritual intelligence, it might be possible to control them through some kind of sound wave, but for void beasts, it was simply impossible. This was because void beasts were known for their desire for freedom and freedom. He had also come into contact with some so-called beast tamers before, but he had never seen them with such a beast tamer technique. But today, reality gave him a heavy blow, because there really was someone who could tame beasts, and what they tamed was the most difficult void beast to tame. The human on the back of the skate was wearing a large cloak, and his entire face was hidden in the darkness. The skate passed by silently, and the cloak fluttered in the wind, giving people a sense of heavy visual and psychological pressure. There was no wind in the universe, only the omnipresent flow of cosmic particles. So, the fluttering of the cloak was just a gimmick deliberately created by the cultivators. Was it for the sake of being cool? The good news was that this person's realm was still yuanying. The bad news was that behind the ray monster, hundreds of yuanying void beasts and thousands of Jindan beasts cover the sky, forming a small beast tide. Perhaps it could not be called a tide, but a beast wave would be more accurate. Because he was hiding in the small meteorite, he did not actively spread out his divine sense for fear of being discovered by the void beasts. He only observed with his divine sense passively. So, when the beast tide gathered, he could not sense it. Now that they were surging towards him silently, a sense of uneasiness arose in his heart. However, no matter how uneasy it was, it could only hide in the small meteorite and see what kind of tricks these creatures could play. If there were no humans controlling it, it might just be a simple and instinctive beast tide. However, if there were humans involved, then there would be many variables. The variables still came. They were straightforward, and the target was clear. The horde of beasts surrounded the small meteorite in the center, forming a three-dimensional encirclement. He was exposed. It might be the two yuanying void beasts, but Lu Xiaoyi was more inclined to think of other possibilities. More likely, The beast tide did not want to break through the space barrier to enter the main world. Their main target was actually him, or any human who was still near the road sign. Ordinary void beasts might not understand this, but humans were different, especially those who had lost more than 10 cultivators. He was only thinking about how to find a reason from the change in the Great Tao. But in reality, it was more likely that it was the most direct cause and effect. If you killed someone else's people, it was only natural that they would come to you for revenge. With a judgment, he had an attitude. Lu Xiaoyi was still sitting in the small meteorite. He did not come out to greet them, nor did he talk to them. He also did not escape. He was calm and peaceful, as if everything that happened in the outside world had nothing to do with him. He could sit still, but the beast-tide army could not wait. One of the yuanying void beasts in the encirclement swung its claws and pounced towards the small meteorite. Before it could get within 100 miles, a faint light seemed to flash in the void. Without any warning, the void beast was cleaved in half by an unknown force. Amidst the Tao dissipation phenomenon, the beast tide's emotions fluctuated. There was bloodlust, anger, and fear. Lu Xiaoyi did not care about this. He had avoided them earlier because he did not want to cause trouble. Now that he had made a move, it was the swordsman's style. The beast tide had the tendency to rush forward impulsively, but this kind of restlessness was stopped by the cultivator riding on the back of the ray. This was a very mysterious beast taming technique. To restrain thousands of void beasts at the same time, there were hundreds of yuanying void beasts among them. This person's beast taming ability could only be described as terrifying. He lightly lifted the ray and moved forward slightly. It was a very cautious move. He released his divine sense. Fellow Taoist, you are ruthless. You don't ask if you are a friend or foe. Is this how you treat a guest? Lu Xiaoyi was indifferent. No matter who it is, as long as they enter my line of defense, they will die. It doesn't matter if it is your lackeys, your ray, or you. There is no difference. The beast tamer choked heavily. He was a top figure in the negative space. In his entire life, no one had dared to be so rampant in front of him. However, the sword from before made him very clear in his heart that this person had the confidence to be so rampant. Swordsmen, they were all so arrogant. This was also the orthodoxy that he did not want to encounter the most in the universe. He suppressed the anger in his heart. Now was not the time to shed all pretense of cordiality. He needed to figure out this person's background. Hiding your head and shrinking your tail. Are you afraid of meeting people? Lu Xiaoyi retorted sarcastically. I don't talk to people who cover their faces. If you want to see me, take away your gunny sack first. Chapter 1050. The man on the skate rider hesitated for a moment. He had the intention to direct the group of beasts to rush up and beat him up, but he was also very clear that the strength of a sword cultivator lay in the word control. They were not afraid of being beaten up by groups. Even if he had hundreds of nascent soul beasts, with the strength of this person's sword skills, it would be very difficult to stop him. If it was another orthodoxy, he would not have such a good temper. But this was a swordsman. With a shake of his body, the large cloak retreated to his waist, revealing a handsome face with sharp eyebrows. He did not put on any airs, but a dazzling light flashed above his head. An ray of light fell on the small meteorite, splitting it in half. Oomph. It's not that I'm afraid of you. If it wasn't for your sword just now, I would have been chased around like a dog by now. Heaven's choice, I dare to invite you to come out and meet me. A person flashed out from the small meteorite. Lu Xiaoyi showed a curious expression. Yo, a fellow of the sword vein. That's not good. Zhou Xian is free and unfettered. He's here trying to comprehend life. Why are you surrounding your master for no reason? What are you trying to do? Huang Yin shouted. This is the negative space. I, Heaven's choice, am the master of this place. You're just a dove occupying a magpie's nest. And you dare to talk about the master? Lu Xiaoyi was very serious. To a swordsman, the place I occupy is my place, and I am a master. No matter where it is, it's the immortal court. If I occupy it, it's mine. This was the first time Huang Yin met someone more arrogant than him. He had the impulse to attack regardless of the consequences, but his rationality reminded him that he had to ask more clearly. That was how momentum worked. Once you took the first step, you would have to keep taking it. The reason I'm surrounding you is because a murder happened here a few years ago. 12 Heaven's Choice cultivators were killed here. If you say that this has nothing to do with you, this poor Taoist will leave immediately without another word. Lu Xiaoyi said calmly, "Oh, you're talking about those 12 people? Then I'm afraid they really have something to do with me. I've already sent them into reincarnation. Are you satisfied with this answer?" Huang Yin's eyes turned cold. This was within his expectations. He also knew that a proud orthodoxy like Sword Vane would never deny killing someone. "Why did you kill him? Where are your accomplices?" Lu Xiaoyi said casually, "Does a swordsman need a reason to kill someone? But since you and I share the same sword vein, I might as well say a few more words." They were messing around on the road signs of Zhouxian. "As the guardian, is there a problem for me to kill them? As for his accomplices, why would he need help to kill these good-for-nothings? If you don't believe me, just come at me." However, in a few years, someone might come to me and ask me about the culprit behind the murder case. Huang Yin was so angry that his blood was boiling, but he knew that he wouldn't be able to gain the upper hand in this dispute. As the strongest Yuanying hired by Wuhou country in the negative space, he knew very well why Taoist Huang and his gang were here. It was obvious that when Taoist Huang changed the key to the road sign, he didn't notice the guardian of this world's road sign and angered him. When he saw that his road sign was being tampered with, he killed him out of anger. This was probably the reason. The key was that the road sign belonged to Zhouxian. Logically, they had no right to tamper with it. It didn't matter if they did it secretly. They could just restore it after changing it. However, if they were caught at the scene, it would be hard to explain. What was worse was that the one who revealed the secret to them was only a part of Zhouxian's forces in the upper realm, not all of them. Now that they had bumped into this part that didn't know about it, things became very troublesome. He had to make a choice. How to shut this guy's mouth? Should he destroy him physically? Or should he corrupt him? No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't do either. He didn't even dare to order the Void Beasts to attack together. He was afraid that this guy would run back and add fuel to the fire. While he was still hesitating, the swordsman added fuel to the fire. "You're in a dilemma, aren't you? Wuhou, you've been stealing the road sign for so many years. Now that the truth is out, you've cut off a path to the negative realm. How about this? I'll give you a chance. Swordsman's chance. Why don't you and I have showdown with swords? If you win, I'll pretend that nothing happened and won't report this to the sect. But if I win, you have to tell me the truth about all the things that you, Wuhou, have done here. Is that fair enough? Let me remind you, don't take your void beasts too seriously. In my eyes, you're just waving your sword a few more times." Huang Yin calculated in his heart. Even if he were to command the void beast to attack, the success rate would be less than 50%. Because of the unfamiliar swordsman's flying sword ability, because of the swordsman's specialty, because whether it was him or the void beast below, they weren't good at trapping and delaying. When the void beasts swarmed over, they could charge forward bravely, but they couldn't do anything too delicate. That was the specialty of Buddhism and Orthodox Dharma lineages. If it was a one-on-one fight, at least this person wouldn't be running away. He felt that his own sword's strength might not be able to match the power of that person's sword, but he had a true monarch rank void beast as his mount. It was hard to tell who would win. More importantly, if the other party was a Dharma cultivator, he would attack without hesitation. However, he had to respect a swordsman. A dispute between swordsmen should be settled with the sword. "I accept your challenge. However, I don't know much about how Heaven's chosen cultivators send cultivators to the origin world through Changshuo, so don't get your hopes up." Huang Yin immediately ordered the void beasts to retreat. What made him feel awkward was that apart from a few thousand Jin Dan void beasts that obediently left, most of the Yuanying void beasts didn't move at all. The Ray monster let out a soundless roar. For void beasts, there was no such thing as reasoning. It was a pure suppression of strength. However, there were still many yuanying void beasts that didn't move. Lu Xiaoyi watched all of this with great interest. He also understood that this cultivator called Huang Yin didn't have any kind of beast-taming technique. The reason he could gather so many void beasts was mostly due to luck, and a small part of it was because of his true monarch ray monster. When a nascent soul realm void beasts were still young, the pressure of a true monarch beast could still suppress them. However, if there were too many wild nascent soul realm void beasts, they would follow their instincts rather than listen to the orders of a true monarch-level nascent soul realm void beast. Moreover, the ray beasts had just become true monarchs, and their strength was not enough to suppress the void beasts. "Why don't I help you kill them all?" Lu Xiaoyi said sarcastically from the side. Huang Yin felt that he was very unlucky. Because of a moment of arrogance, he accepted a mission that put him in a difficult position. He didn't intend to gather the void beasts, and he was far from proficient in beast taming. His ability in this aspect was basically achieved through the ray monster. However, he saw a large number of void beasts gathering along the way, so he took advantage of the situation. This was a terrible decision because the beast horde quickly went beyond his ability to control. When he gave orders according to the will of these void beasts, they would gladly accept it. However, if he went against their will, they would choose to follow their instincts. This kind of beast taming was flawed. It was more like a kind of coercion. Chapter 10:51. Huang Yin's best choice right now was to let the beasts attack. That way, he could maintain his position among the void beasts. However, that would go against his original intentions. When it came to choosing between following the void beasts and following his sword, he chose the latter without hesitation. The former would give him some face, but the latter would allow him to go further. Back off. Those who don't listen will be killed without mercy. The yuanying void beasts started to become a little restless. Hundreds of them gathered together, giving them an even stronger urge to attack. One of them even dared to provoke him. This immediately displeased the ray monster under him. It opened its mouth and swallowed the rash void beast into its stomach. This was the fuse that ignited the flames. Lu Xiaoyi was shocked to find that the large group of enemies had started to kill each other. Sword light flashed everywhere, and beastly roars could be heard. The wild void beasts showed their eternal nature, which was their disdain for humans and their tamed brethren. The skate riders' sword skills were extraordinary, and the skates under them were even faster. They could withstand the attacks of more than a dozen nascent soul void beasts without falling. However, there were more than 100 void beasts. What was this? Lu Xiaoyi was a swordsman with perseverance. He sighed, drew his sword, and joined the battle. Huang Yin had never imagined that a person's sword skills would reach such a level. The sword light was like a river hanging in the sky. It would gather and scatter at times, but it never missed. It was like a chain of death, beautiful and enchanting without a trace of fierceness. However, the void beasts that came into contact with it were like autumn leaves, helplessly falling in the autumn wind. There were no exceptions. Even the ray monster under him subconsciously distanced itself from the river of death. As close as they were, they could feel the fear and dread in the depths of the ray monster's consciousness. However, this wasn't the most important thing. Huang Yin knew that this unfamiliar swordsman wouldn't take advantage of this opportunity to attack him. This was a tacit understanding between swordsmen. A swordsman who could use a flying sword to such an extent must have his own pride. More importantly, he saw something familiar in the strange swordsman's swordsmanship. An eye one unsheathed his sword. The sword rays split up, gathering and dispersing, disappearing without a trace. One could only see the sword, but not the person. One could only hear the beast roar, but not the sword sound. Like a heavenly steed soaring through the skies, he was free and unrestrained. He was also a swordsman. Even though the appearance of the flying sword was completely different from his, he was still able to see something that was similar to his on the inside. That was a concept. Only a swordsman who had been deeply immersed in it would be able to understand the similarities. So, who was plagiarizing who? He was a rarely seen swordsman in the Heaven's Choice continent. The sword vein was the only orthodoxy in the Heaven's Choice continent that didn't aim to establish its own country. They wandered the world, and all of them had the most unruly temperament. They had a free and unrestrained personality. Their origins were complex, and they came from all sorts of orthodoxies. They were all rogue cultivators who grew up in the Heaven's Choice continent among the countless large and small Tao tablets. Once by chance, they entered a human country that bordered an immemorial beast territory and accidentally entered an unknown Tao tablet. From then on, they embarked on the path of the sword and became more and more engrossed in it. He, Huang Yin, was one of them. At that time, he was still a small Jin Dan and belonged to the beast-taming orthodoxy. He had a void beast that played with him since he was young and grew up with him. In the words of the beast-taming school, it was a cultivator's life-bound divine beast. Once by chance, he came to the place that changed his life. From then on, he severed the beast-taming inheritance that he had cultivated for hundreds of years and became a swordsman. Some reasons didn't need to be thought about. When he saw those incomparably dazzling sword rays in the nameless Tao tablet, his intuition told him that this was what he truly wanted. In the Heaven's Choice continent, every swordsman had the same experience. They didn't establish their orthodoxy. They didn't establish a country, because this was the requirement of a nameless Tao tablet for every sword cultivator. They didn't dare to go against the sword ancestors' orders. In the Heaven's Choice continent, they were the most relaxed, but also the most united. They were the most unrestrained, and also the most iron-blooded and cruel. They didn't have a teacher, no system, no sect rules, no taboos, just like those wanderers in the ancient human countries. They only had brothers who also practiced the sword. He wasn't a citizen of Wu-Ho country, and he didn't belong to any country of Heaven's Choice. He only came forward bravely because he heard about the tragedy in the negative space from a friend. There was no reward, and he didn't listen to anyone. If he wanted to do it, he would do it. This was the common personality of a swordsman who studied under the nameless sword steel. In the Heaven's Choice continent, many orthodoxies laughed at them because their roots were incomparably complicated. The sword steel didn't teach them how to cultivate, and they didn't pass down any techniques. They only had the sword, the only sword. It was also because of this that as long as one was a cultivator, they could enter the sword steel. It had nothing to do with Tao realm, cultivation, or roots. If they didn't like someone, they wouldn't be able to stay for even a moment. If they liked someone, they would immediately abandon their original inheritance. They were two extremes, but he didn't expect that an impromptu trip would allow him to meet a real swordsman from the autonomous world. Huang Yin knew very well that he wasn't a match for him. The difference in sword techniques was like heaven and earth, even with the addition of the skate monster. This could be seen from the skate monster's psychological reaction. Void beasts didn't care about Tao heart. They relied more on instinct. They were already instinctively afraid, so there was no need to mention anything else. He had already lost his hostility, and now he just wanted to ask about this Taoist's inheritance. Because in the Heaven's Choice continent, everyone knew that the nameless sword steel was created by a sword immortal from the autonomous world. The orthodox one was in the origin world. Lu Xiaoyi also felt very strange. This Heaven's Choice's swordsmanship was very familiar to him, although it looked messy on the outside. That was because he hadn't been taught Xuan Yuan's swordsmanship theory. But even if too many correct and incorrect ideas were added into it, the root couldn't be wrong. This was the path of the Xuan Yuan's inner sword. A Heaven's Choice had the core principles of the Xuan Yuan's inner sword. It was truly inconceivable. Unfortunately, he had left the fifth ring too early. Some of the secrets that he could understand after reaching the Yuanying level were now completely unknown. For example, who was the sword immortal that Slug and the others talked about. For example, the secret of the fifth ring's Crow Peak. For example, the legend of the two-odd dung on the Blue Sky Mountain's Flying Peak. These things, according to the rules of the Xian Yuan, would be gradually unsealed after a cultivator reached the Yuaning level and would be completely unsealed when they reached the true monarch level. He had never been interested in the glorious past of others, but now he was a bit curious. There were countless sword immortals in Xian Yuan, and those who were half immortals and above had the ability to go to the Heaven's Choice continent. Outstanding people like them wouldn't let go of any unfamiliar and mystical places. Therefore, it wasn't strange that one or several Xian Yuan swordsmen went to the Heaven's Choice continent and left behind their inheritance. That should be the case, right? Chapter 1052. With Lu Xiaoyi joining the fray, dozens of the most ferocious void beasts were wiped out in an instant. The remaining dozens of nascent soul stage void beasts scattered out of fear instinctively. The entire space was cleared. Lu Xiaoyi stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking at the eye-catching ray in the void of the universe with great interest, as well as the eye-catching swordsman on the back of the ray, whose cloak fluttered in the air out of habit during battle. To be honest, he also yearned for such a style. It was much cooler than him eating sugar-coated haws after killing people. Unfortunately, after more than 800 years of practicing the sword, his achievements in the sword were unparalleled, but he just didn't have the time to design a flashy battle style for himself. Huang Yin was a bit embarrassed. Swordsman's battle style was about momentum, about finishing everything in one go. It sounded simple, but it was very difficult to actually do it. One needed to stand on the moral high ground, to devote oneself wholeheartedly, and to be full of confidence in one's attack. Not only confidence in one's strength, but also the affirmation of the need to attack. In short, swift like the wind, fierce like fire, and full of aggressiveness. This was clearly reflected in the Nameless Sword Dao tablet, the Nameless Sword Ancestor. He was also able to do this in the process of fighting against the cultivators of the Heaven's Choice continent. He would start building up his momentum before the battle, raising himself to the most perfect state both physically and mentally, and unleashing his sword explosively. But today, when he met this one-eared swordsman, he couldn't raise his momentum at all. It was as if he was always short of breath. There were simply too many mistakes. Bringing a group of void beasts was a first mistake. Inviting someone to stand on the moral high ground was a second mistake. Arguing, but not being able to be unreasonable was a third mistake. Driving the group of void beasts and not losing control was a fourth mistake. Not being able to quickly suppress, it was a fifth mistake. With so many mistakes, how could he still have the will to fight? Before the battle even started, he was already completely suppressed. This was the first time in his arrogant battle career that this person was able to completely suppress him without him noticing. Just based on this point, this person was a true swordsman expert. The Origin World's true inheritance was indeed worthy of its reputation. These Heaven's Choice swordsmen all thought that they were amazing in the Heaven's Choice continent, suppressing those of the same realm with their skills. In the end, when they came out and met the real person, they realized what it meant to be frogs at the bottom of a well. But he didn't know what to say. Even if this one-eared inheritance was the origin of the Heaven's Choice Nameless Sword Ancestor, what could he do? Return to the ancestral land? He was not that despicable. Flattery? He couldn't do it. Leave without a care? No. The swordsman's spirit that he had learned from the Nameless Sword Dao tablet would not allow him to escape. Struggling between reality and dignity was what he was feeling right now. Lu Xiaoyi was a cunning old fox. He was very clear that at this sensitive moment, one sentence from him could possibly win Xuanyuan's heart. This heart might even ferment and spread in the Heaven's Choice continent. At the same time, the wrong attitude and the high and mighty judgment could add another enemy for him and Xian Yuan. Perhaps it was a group of enemies. And these people should be fighting for Xianyuan in the first place. He smiled and pointed at the ray monster that flew under Xianfei. This thing is very cool. I used to want to have a mount like this, but in my sect it's not allowed. Although there are no hard and fast rules, it's an unspoken rule. Do you know why? Huang Yin laughed dryly. He didn't expect the topic to start here. At least it made him feel relaxed and without any pressure, but he didn't know that this was also a kind of clever speech technique. I know, a swordsman shouldn't rely on external objects, especially when moving freely. This one was obtained when I tamed a beast in Jindan. I have a deep affection for it, so I can't bear to part with it. Lu Xiaoyi played it down. Then keep it. When one's realm is low, the sect is afraid that the disciples won't understand and will only look at the surface and miss the essence. That's why there are so many restrictions. Actually, when one's realm is higher, one will know that there are no taboos when playing with swords. It's good as long as it's helpful. It's good as long as you like it. What rules are there? Let alone a ray monster. Even if it's an inflatable doll, what's the big deal? Huang Yin was confused. Inflatable doll? What's that? Lu Xiaoyi changed the topic. It's also a good thing. It's the perfect partner for traveling in the void. Huang Yin had long since lost his vigilance. This wasn't carelessness, but rather his intuition as a swordsman. Lu Xiaoyi patted the ray monster's huge body and joked, "Are you nervous? That won't do. Since you're with a swordsman, you should trust a swordsman." Huang Yin completely relaxed. It's just like that. It's been with me for hundreds of years. It has a good temper, but it's a bit timid. Lu Xiaoyi laughed. You can't be timid when you're with a swordsman. Whether it's in the main world or the negative space, fighting is a common occurrence. Since you're friends with a swordsman, you have to get used to it. Looking around, he pointed at the road signs and sighed. My responsibility is to guard the road signs. To be honest, I won't object to any of you heaven's chosen cultivators going to the main world to take a look because I'm in a negative space right now. In your space. It's impolite not to reciprocate. There are always benefits to interacting with each other. This is also a part of cultivation. To put it bluntly, what main world or negative space? This is the stage for us cultivators. There's no such thing as a place that belongs to anyone. Huang Yin nodded. Fellow Taoist is right. What I care about is attitude. Lu Xiaoyi opened his mouth and said, I don't care how you heaven's chosen people are against each other in private, and I can't control it. But you can't do anything to the road signs to achieve your goals. Because they're now mine. Wu Ho's people did that, and they were so rude. Then, as a swordsman, do you think I should reason with them? Or kill them? Huang Yin was speechless. He knew the temperament of Wu Ho's people. The more you reason with them, the more they'll get. If it was him, he would probably do the same. He came here under the premise that they were all heaven's chosen people. But now, the culprit had become his fellow Taoist. Lu Xiaoyi would never say that he was flawless or perfect. He only described himself as a swordsman. This made it easier for others to accept. It was like chatting with a friend. The most important thing was to be relaxed, and not to force others to agree with his point of view, or to pry into other people's secrets. Of course, this was his real goal. You Wu Ho's people, and now it seems that you might not be Wu Ho's people. I don't care about that. What I want to say is that Wu Ho's people entering the main world in an organization is not simple. It's not purely for their own Tao, but for their own goals. You might not be clear on this point, and I don't want to ask. What I want to say is that forces like Heaven's chosen Wu Ho's people are colluding with other forces in the main world. They want to deal with another huge main world force, and my sect exists. I can't ask about the specifics, but killing them will make me feel better. This is also the reason why those 12 people didn't escape. In the cultivation world, this kind of dog-biting dog is everywhere. I also have my own doghouse. Whoever wants to touch my doghouse has to go through my teeth first. So you see, it's actually very simple. Chapter 1053. Huang Yin suddenly raised his head. What they want to deal with includes fellow Taoists or vain. If it's not presumptuous, I would like to know which fellow Taoist sect is. Lu Xiaoyi spread his hands regretfully. It's not convenient. It's not convenient for me. It's not convenient for you either. If you've been practicing sword Dao for such a long time and still don't know where your sword Dao comes from, then it only means that the time isn't right. This sounds very mysterious, but in front of the great Dao, we're all ants. There are too many places we can't touch. But there's one thing you understand very well. Why bother to search for it? The moment the sword is drawn, you'll know who's friend and who's enemy. What else is important? The true essence of deception was to be vague and indistinct, true and false, false and true. How could he know where this guy's sword Dao inheritance came from? Did it have to be from Xianyuan? Not necessarily. It could only be said that it was more likely to be from Xianyuan. There was no need to dig out the other person's background the first time they met and reveal their own. That wasn't shrewd at all. It didn't have the bearing of an expert. The best restraint wasn't to tie someone to your own chariot and tie them up. It should be to give the other person a thought, so that when he flew freely, there would always be an invisible string holding him back. It should be mentioned a little in the end. Thoughts were a very wonderful thing. The wonderful thing was that they would always consciously or unconsciously coincide with your hopes. The more they didn't tell you, the more perfect the coincidence would be. You would automatically forget all those unfavorable guesses, but you would deepen the evidence until you were terminally ill and trapped in the mud, of course. Lu Xiaoyi didn't feel that he was harming Huang Yan. As a swordsman, luring others to Xuan Yuan's chariot was a great opportunity. If you didn't have some ability, you wouldn't even have a chance. He needed to have his own eyes, ears, and nose in the heavenly choice continent. These natives were much simpler than him going in to search for the truth. Moreover, it was also the power of the sword vein. He hoped that one day in the future, when a war broke out in the cultivation world, the sword vein would stand on the same front and not kill each other for their own masters. Huang Yin nodded. That's right. Why was the nameless sword Dao still nameless? How could such a great inheritance be unknown? There must be some reason that they did not understand. Perhaps the time was not right. Yuan Ying's level was actually very awkward. In the eyes of small cultivators, she was an ancestor, but in the void of the universe, she was just an ant at the bottom. Mono-eared was right. Did he need to know its name? Once the sword was drawn, they would know each other's foundation. This was more reliable than any words. He wouldn't express anything or worship anything just because of the other party's words. He wasn't that shallow. He had plenty of time to search for the truth. In Heaven's choice, there were many swordsman brothers who had the same desire as him. But first they should walk out. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to do anything in the Heaven's choice continent. He was blind. There was also the secret of Wuhou country. Previously, he did not care about it, but now he did not think that way. If Wuhou country's opponent was the foundation for him to learn the Sword Dao tablet, then, as a swordsman, he did not need anyone to teach him what to do. In that case, we'll meet again someday. If fellow Taoist has time, you can come to Heaven's Choice as a guest. There are many passionate swordsman friends there. If I have the chance, I might also go to Zhouxian to take a look. It's the universe's #1 world, and it's also very famous in Heaven's Choice. Not long after, he turned back. There's one more thing. Fellow Taoist, Dan might not be too familiar with the void beasts in the negative space. In any case, I was once a disciple of the beast taming school, so I know a bit more about this. The reason why I brought a group of void beasts here was not completely intentional. It was because the void beasts were originally gathered in this region. Although I don't know why, this beast tide can be expected. Fellow Taoist sword skills are unparalleled, but it will be difficult for you to stay out of the beast tide alone. A real beast tide, even a small one, has at least a dozen monarch-level beasts. The only reason you haven't seen them now is because they are still gathering void beasts in different regions. It's only a matter of time before they arrive. This is not something that can be stopped by humans. When the beast tide gathers, their bestial nature will be unleashed. Even I don't dare to be in the middle of it. Fellow Taoist, you still have to be more careful. Lu Xiaoyi nodded in thanks. Yes, I also have this feeling. Moreover, I think that the purpose of this beast tide is to break through the spatial barrier at the Changshuo region and cause the Great Dao to collapse. Even humans are surprised, let alone the void beasts who are sensitive to changes in the world. This was the first time Huang Yin heard that the beast tide had such a purpose. It made some sense, but he wasn't sure about it. After thinking for a while, he reminded, fellow Taoist, there's one thing that you have to understand. Void beasts usually don't take the initiative to enter the human domain to cause trouble, but this refers to their normal state. If they are in the middle of a beast tide, their berserk state is the most uncontrollable state of the void beasts. Coupled with the fact that there are countless beasts, it's not impossible for them to wreak havoc in the nearby human domain. I don't know the specific defense situation of the Changshuo region. If there's a worldly macro membrane, then everything will be fine. If there isn't, then you have to think of a countermeasure in advance. A berserk beast tide has no sense of reason. That's all I have to say. See you again. Huang Yin left on his way. Lu Xiaoyi didn't ask him to stay, because the string that bound him had already been set. No matter how far he flew, he wouldn't be able to escape this layer of shackles. He also didn't ask whether this fellow could pass through the spatial barrier. To be a friend or a part of Xianyuan was a basic ability. If he couldn't do it himself, then there was nothing to be concerned about. Having such a person in the Heaven's Choice continent was 100 times better than going alone. He didn't underestimate the beast horde that Huang Yin mentioned. When it came to things that he didn't understand, he was more inclined to believe in his profession. Although Huang Yin's profession was a bit laughable, the beast horde that he led actually disobeyed him. This was related to him changing to the way of the sword after Jindan. It wasn't that he was incompetent. The problem was, how could he prevent the beast tide from harming the Changshuo region? He wouldn't consider the road signs. If they were damaged by the beast tide, then so be it. What could he do? Facing hundreds of true Lord Void beasts and thousands of Yuanying beasts alone? Was this something a Yuanying cultivator could handle? After all, they were inanimate objects. If they were damaged, then he could just replace them. At most, it would just delay some time and affect his journey. More importantly, the safety of the Changshuo region was important. Even if the possibility wasn't high, as long as there was a 10% chance, he had to deal with it 100%, because there were still tens of millions of ordinary mortals in the Changshuo region. This was a big matter. It was also a great merit. Should he intercept the beast tide in the negative space? Lure them away? Or should he passively defend them after they enter the main world? This was a very complicated problem. He couldn't make a decision alone. He needed to discuss it with the cultivators of the Changshuo region. Hopefully, the old man Kong Gu had his own special method of defending the region. It was probably too late to ask for reinforcements from Zhou Xian now. Chapter 1054. Old Taoist Kong Gu felt a headache coming on. Because he did not know much about large-scale beast hordes, he thought that the void beasts would rush into the void at the first moment, but it was just a small group. Changshuo was a small world with limited Taoist teachings. Laojun Temple was a pure Taoist inheritance, and there were no other forces in the world that were good at controlling beasts. Like Lu Xiaoyi, as a cultivator, the actual controller of Changshuo world, he valued the safety of the mortal world more than anything else. This was the cornerstone of cultivation. Even if the possibility was not high, it was worth dealing with all his might. Since Sanda's group of people came, what we have been doing is to recall the people who went out. Until now, most of the Yuanying have returned, but my 2 senior brothers have disappeared without a trace, and I don't know where they died. Lu Xiaoyi had to remind him, Senior, this is not the problem of summoning people, right? Thousands of void beasts are jumping over. Even if your Laojun Temple has a full group of people, what can you do? If you want to rely on humans to fight directly, I'm afraid you'll need half of Zhou Xian's cultivators. First, it's impossible. Second, there's no time. Kong Gu said anxiously, Yes, we can't just think of fighting directly. That's the last resort. Little friend, do you mean that we can't let them come over directly? For the safety of the world, I'm willing to sacrifice myself. Laojun Temple has many generous people who are willing to go to the anti-space to stop the beast hordes. Lu Xiaoyi was speechless. Senior, aren't you still fighting directly? You're just changing the medicine, changing the environment from the main world to the anti-space. Thousands of beasts are swarming over. Where can we fight to achieve the effect? Kongu's eyes lit up. Little friend, you're right. I'm thinking too much. We can't fight directly. We can only use skillful force. Then, if we close the anti-space waymark, can we achieve our goal? This operation may affect Zhou Xian's travel through the anti-space. I'll have to trouble little friend. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. What trouble? Since I'm in Changshuo, I'll put the common people's lives first. There's nothing to decline. Before coming, I didn't close the waymark. Senior, you should know that there's not much meaning in closing the waymark. If the void beasts want to cross over, the main reason they chose this place was because the spatial barriers here were much weaker than other places. They were able to find this place mostly because of their instincts as void beasts, not because of the road signs. Therefore, even if the road signs are closed, the void beast will not lose its direction. This method will not work. Kongu was puzzled. What does little friend mean? Lu Xiaoyi sighed. Senior, you also know that there is no perfect plan for this. He had done his best and left the rest to fate. Firstly, the purpose of the beast horde might not necessarily be to pass through the main and reverse space walls. Secondly, even if they wanted to come over, they might not necessarily have the ability to do so. If we really start to build a channel, I wonder if we can move them to other desolate universes with the help of the road signs? As long as there are no human domains nearby, they will only disperse in the universe. This will only increase the number of void beasts in the origin world by less than 1/10,000th. It won't have much of an impact. Daoist Kongu's eyes lit up. That's a good idea, but this requires a higher level of authority. Do you have it? Lu Xiaoyi laughed dryly. I don't, but I have nothing to do these years, so I secretly figured it out. Kongu knew what he meant. Little friend, don't worry. You have done your best for Changshuo. This old man knows what's good for him. These things will not be leaked to a third party. Then, you need to stay at the reverse space signs to be able to use it. Under the beast horde, there will be countless great demons. It will be difficult to completely hide their tracks. Even I am not confident. How will you deal with it? Lu Xiaoyi had already thought it through. The reason why it is difficult to hide their tracks is that when the density of the beast horde in this space is too high, there will always be great demons that are too close to it. Only then will they be discovered. My idea is to not bet on whether the beast horde wants to pass through the space walls. We will think that their goal must be the origin world, and then take the initiative to open the road signs. What will the beast horde do? Kongu secretly sighed at this junior's good brain. The beast horde must have their own way to pass through the space walls. They are the masters of the universe's void. They are born with abilities and supernatural powers. But this is not easy. Otherwise, why haven't the void beasts been seen traveling between the positive and negative space since the creation of the reverse space? If they sense the message from the road signs made by humans, then they will definitely use it. You can also change the key of the road signs and change the path of the space extra-dimensional channel so that they can pass through to other universes. Well, this method is feasible. He closed his eyes and pondered. After all, he was in the realm of Lord of Supremacy. His vision was richer than Lu Xiaoyi's. He knew that it was impossible for him to do this because it involved the issue of the authority of the road signs. There are two important points in this plan. First, you have to hide your breath. If you can't do it, you'll be trapped in the beast horde with nowhere to escape. I want to enter the reverse space with you again and personally verify your tracks. Otherwise, there is no need to take this risk. Lu Xiaoyi knew that this was Kongu's concern for him. He was afraid that Kongu would force himself to take action. The old Taoist did not know about his magic of being with the stars, so it was normal for him to have such concerns. Second, the ability of space. With all due respect, you have not been in contact with the great Tao of space for long. Although you have the ability to learn it, it is still very limited. This thing can't be learned quickly. How about this? I have a space treasure in my temple called 3 Point Xian. It can cut space and move channels. I will teach you how to use it. If you use it with the road signs, you'll have a better chance of moving the beast horde to another place. Lu Xiaoyi laughed. Senior, you have hidden this treasure well. Laojun Temple is in tatters, so it is purposely shown to be poor. This kid is shallow and greedy. You gave this good thing to me to use, and you won't let me escape with the treasure? Kongu laughed and scolded. You think you can escape? Sigh, if the so-called treasure is not used, it will not benefit people. What's the use of it? Laojun Temple is located in a remote area with limited resources. It is not as rich as Zhou Xian with countless treasures. This 3 points Xian was passed down from the ancestors and has at least tens of thousands of years of history. Its origin is not ordinary. In terms of quantity, my Changshuo treasure is not even a fraction of your Zhou Xian. But in terms of treasure quality, with my 3 points Xian ability, even in Zhou Xian, you may not be able to find a treasure comparable to it. The two of them made their own preparations and entered the negative space on their ferries. As soon as they entered, Kongu was shocked by the density of void beasts. It was much more than he had imagined. Under his divine sense, the beasts were sneaky and in groups. At this moment, he no longer doubted the purpose of the beast horde here. There were two types of beast horde. One was turbulent and aimless, like locusts. It was easy to handle because they did not have a fixed target. The other was like now, gathering the beast horde. There must be a purpose. Next to Changshuo, what else could it be? Chapter 1055. Lu Xiaoyi buried himself in the meteorite where the waymark was because the old Taoist Kongu wanted to test his concealment ability. In the old Taoist words, if you can't even hide from me, then you can forget about those void beasts with keen senses. When he exerted the being with the stars to the extreme, his whole person seemed to become a part of the meteorite. Kongu patrolled back and forth at the meteorite's waymark, but it was difficult to determine whether there were human cultivators hiding in it, and he saw Lu Xiaoyi burrowing in. This made him more or less have some confidence. This was Zhou Jr. seemed to be quite strong. You must be more familiar with the use of the 3-point comet. Theory alone is not enough. You must have practical experience. Although this kind of spiritual treasure does not have spiritual wisdom, its power is unquestionable. I have already taught you the method. When I return to the main world later, you can use me as an experiment to see if it is successful. Lu Xiaoyi was a little hesitant. Senior, if I move you far away, you will not know how long it will take for you to return. If it is a strange universe environment, you may not even be able to find your way back. The defense of the Long Shua domain still needs you to preside over it. Kongu said decisively, do you think that in the thousands of beast tide, one more or one less true monarch is meaningful? Before I came, I've already explained the worst-case scenario, so don't worry. As for whether I can return or not, it is not something you should be concerned about. According to my judgment, it is impossible for there to be a big deviation in the passage of the main world and reverse space barrier. 2 universes is the furthest. If you can do it and send me to 100 universes, then wouldn't it become a divine tool to travel the universe? I am quite familiar with the nearby universes, so I won't get lost. You just have to take care of yourself. Don't worry about things that are not important. Lu Xiaoyi could only agree. All right then, the key is that no one has used this method before. I am afraid that I will accidentally send you to the immortal court. Well, even 2 universes are not close. You will need time to return. I hope that the beast tide has not started to move by then. Both of them did not mention the worst-case scenario, that the passage was wrong. The extra-dimensional space was chaotic, and the cultivators who entered would never be able to come out. But this was the world of cultivators. When both of them carried out this plan, they were very clear that for Kongu, it was related to his domain. No sacrifice was not worth it. His 2 true senior brothers were still wandering in the universe. As the only true monarch of Changsha, he could not shirk this responsibility. There was no room to avoid it. Taoist Kong Gu's reverse space fairy began to gather energy, opening a passage ahead. He tried to do it as slowly as possible to give Lu Xiaoyi enough time to operate it. At this time, Lu Xiaoyi had already adjusted his authority to the highest level, adjusting the formation of the passage according to his existing knowledge of space. This was a task that was extremely difficult to complete under normal circumstances. The Great Tao of Space was broad and profound. To be able to ferry people to another universe was not within the scope of a true monarch's ability. Even Kong Gu could not do it, let alone a small Yuaniing like him. But it did not matter, he still had some points. It was still not easy. Putting aside the original direction of the waymark and planning a new passage, the biggest problem was not the gathering of energy. The problem was that the energy was provided by the transmigrator. It had nothing to do with him. His problem was how to build a stable passage, not a wavering one with unclear boundaries. He did not want to accidentally lose the old man again. Even in the face of the beast tide, he could not lead these creatures to an unknown, chaotic dimensional space. There were thousands of creatures, the karma involved was huge, and it was not the same as killing them in battle. In short, a stable passage was very important to Changshuo, to Kong Gu, to the beast tide, and to his own safety. To use the power of space beyond his level, he also had to consider the backlash if he failed. Stability was very important, and in his experiments, most of the new passages were unstable and could not be used. Why are you dilly-dallying? Can't you be more decisive? Kong Gu was a little dissatisfied. It was like taking a dump. He had already prepared for a long time, from the stomach to the large intestines, and then to the anus. He could not hold it in any longer, and you still haven't finished digging this cesspool? Lu Xiaoyi was speechless. Aren't I thinking for your sake? It would be best to send him to a beautiful place where he can retire. If he is sent to the 18th level of hell. All right, you can go. With a flash of light, Kong Gu's fairy disappeared. Lu Xiaoyi was not very satisfied. It was a little rushed. The passage was stable enough, but it seemed like, the next moment, the space fluctuated and Kong Gu's fairy appeared near the road sign again. Lu Xiaoyi was very puzzled. Senior, you came back quite quickly. Don't you need to gather energy? Kong Gu said angrily. What do you mean by gathering energy? I did not go out at all. What's wrong with your passage? It's a dead end in front. Fortunately, I reacted quickly and retreated in time. Otherwise, I would have been torn to pieces by the power of space. Lu Xiaoyi was very apologetic, of course. He also quibbled. If you didn't rush me, would it be necessary? So he did it again. Because he had experience, his movements were much faster. Lu Xiaoyi paid special attention to whether the exit was smooth or not, and finally succeeded in sending Kong Gu out. This process was also a process of manipulating space. Changing the way, changing the scene, it was a way of using space. It could be used to transport oneself. It could be used to send others. The external appearance was different, but the fundamental principle was still the same. Of course, he could not do this without the help of 3-point Hyun. It was still a little regretful, because he did not know how far he had sent Kong Gu out. He continued to study the road sign, how to use the secret key and 3-point Hyun together. After a few hours, the answer came. The space fluctuated, and Kong Gu rushed back. Needless to say, he must have been sent too close. Kong Gu stared at him. Kid, don't be afraid of this and that. You can face thousands of void beasts in the negative space calmly. I have lived for more than 1,000 years, and I may not be inferior to you in terms of life and death. Go all out, don't worry so much. Don't think about life and death, and don't think about the distance. You can't even do a successful single raft transfer. How can you guarantee a success rate when facing the beast tide? I see that there are more and more void beasts gathering. If this continues, I may not have the chance to find a gap to cross the barriers soon. There's not much time left. Go all out and do it. Don't be so wishy-washy. Lu Xiaoyi blushed with shame. He also knew that he was not going all out. He could be more ruthless to himself, but to this senior, he always wanted to control the risks. The starting point was good, but it would be bad. It was not the attitude to explore the Tao. This time, he did not have any scruples. He just treated it as a huge void beast in front of him, and he had to send it as far as possible. He also did not restrict himself with the passage guide. Under such operation, a new passage guide gradually took shape, and with the power of Kongu's raft, he sent him out again. Hopefully, he would not fail this time. Chapter 1056. P.S. I wish Eldergwa to ride the golden bull. More and more void beasts gathered in the negative space. There were always 2 or 3 groups of void beasts lingering near the road signs. Taoist Kongu's worry was right. If they really dragged it on until now, they wouldn't even be able to do any experiments. The void beasts would definitely not give the strange creatures a chance to leave. But these were still stragglers. Until a month later, a large group of void beasts flew over. The prototype of a beast tide began to take shape. Lu Xiaoyi hid in the meteorite and shrunk his breath control to the extreme. Not only did he have the coexisting with the stars, he also used the 3-parts comet to cut out a specious space for himself. It was between the dimensional space and the negative space. He couldn't do it as easily as he did in the ruins of the end. He could only do it reluctantly. This was the gap between the realm and the Tao realm. He couldn't make up for it for now. In the end, Qi came out and used the power of fate to hide his mystery. Taoist Kongu was right. The void beasts had their own unique way of sensing. In a sense, they were above humans, especially in their domain, the void of the universe. After the first group of beasts arrived, the rest came very quickly. Among these void beasts that came from afar, there were many large beasts. Yuanying beasts were everywhere, and there were also many monarch-level beasts. He hid in the meteorite and only sensed with his consciousness. There were at least hundreds of monarch-level beasts. This couldn't be considered a small beast tide anymore, right? That idiot Huang Yin had once again led him into a ditch. If this was a large beast tide, he really didn't need to hide here and take the risk. Because there were too many monarch-level void beasts, it meant that there might be demigod-level void beasts among them as the leading beasts. That guy couldn't even control his own beast tide and almost got devoured. How could he believe his judgment? But now there was no chance to regret. He could only brace himself and endure. He hoped that Taoist Kongu was far enough away. Otherwise, if he rashly turned back, even the gods wouldn't be able to save him. He could only continue to wait. As he waited, the aura of the void beasts in the surroundings became denser and denser. It was so dense that he could only sense it passively. There were also hundreds of void beasts of the monarch level flying near the meteorite. This made him, who had always been bold, realize that his action this time was an impulsive action without thinking. If he was exposed, he would die. There was no other possibility. He, who had always been smooth sailing in the universe, finally understood that there were many prerequisites for his so-called dominance. The leader of the beast tide was also made clear. When every void beast of the true Lord level gathered, they would greet one of the void beasts loudly and call him Uncle D. Perhaps it was to express their respect, or perhaps it was because the void beast temperament was originally so unrestrained, but they disdained to be secretive, especially when they were in their own territory and in their own beast herd. This so-called Uncle D seemed to be very close to the meteorite. Lu Xiaoyi suspected that this guy was sitting on the meteorite and giving out orders. Was it intentional, or was it unintentional? But he could only assume that this guy was doing it unintentionally. Of course, there had to be rules for a collar. Style had to be set off by a high platform. While others were standing, the leader had to have an armchair, right? Could it be that this meteorite had coincidentally become Uncle D's armchair? Lu Xiaoyi could not see the appearance of this void beast clearly, because for a cultivator, as long as you looked at it, it would immediately sense it. It would definitely not be unaware. Therefore, he could only feel that Uncle D was crouching on the meteorite, surrounded by thousands of void beasts. The closer ones were at the level of perfected Lord, the further ones were at the level of nascent soul, and the further ones were at the level of nascent soul. Even further away were endless shrimp soldiers and crab generals. Lu Xiaoyi secretly complained in his heart. He could not take the initiative to change. This was a rare dilemma since he started learning the sword. Hundreds of void beasts of the monarch level were above him. This was not something that could be solved by crossing realms. He had asked for it. He could only be a coward. He had hoped that the 7 ants could confuse him. The 3 points comet could conceal his figure, and the coexisting with the stars could disperse his aura. All of his plans started to become laughable when the beast horde exceeded a certain size. Hiding in a meteorite with a diameter of several hundred feet while surrounded by such a horde of beasts was definitely not a wise move. There was no medicine for regret. There was also good news. When the beast horde took shape, the void beasts immediately began to organize to cross the space barrier. This was within his judgment. He needed to decide whether to continue with his original plan. In the beginning, the void beasts completely ignored the humans' road signs when they broke through the barrier. They believed more in their own instincts. Like human cultivators, when the void beasts reached the monarch level, some of them had the ability to move to another space. However, humans relied more on the accumulation of knowledge, while void beasts relied on their instincts. Therefore, humans could use large ferries to bring more of their companions into another space. The void beasts, who were not good at making weapons, could only travel alone. However, this was a beast horde. The purpose of a beast horde was to bring more void beasts of different sizes with them. This was very difficult for them. After many futile attempts, the beast horde started to become irritable. Lu Xiaoyi gritted his teeth. He decided not to die, but to activate the road signs. This allowed the void beasts to see another way. After a while, the void beasts reached an agreement. They were prepared to use the road signs set up by humans. They were not unfamiliar with this, and it was impossible for them to be ignorant. There were similar arrangements set up by human cultivators everywhere in the negative space. It was just that the concealment was brilliant, and it was very difficult to discover. Now that they found such a thing in this place where the space barrier was weak, it didn't seem to be too unexpected. Next, it was Lu Xiaoyi's rhythm. They had already reached this step. There was no point in worrying about whether they would be discovered. As long as he could guide the space quickly enough, the void beast would soon forget about this strange road sign and focus on the new world. The power of the wall breaking was not something he could resist. It was the power of hundreds of monarchs. It was not something a human could resist. Fortunately, he only needed to guide them, just like what he did to Taoist Konggu. Because of their irritable nature, the void beasts gathered energy very quickly. Because of his previous experience, Lu Xiaoyi's guidance could barely keep up. In less than a moment, a deep light hole appeared in the negative space. The void beasts could smell the scent of the main world on the other side. At this time, they no longer had any discipline. They swarmed in like a swarm of bees. The mighty beast horde began to rush towards the new world after their great Tao collapsed. It was as if a hole was dug in a pond. The void beasts rushed into it without any hesitation. Lu Xiaoyi finally heaved a sigh of relief. However, at the same time, he was puzzled. How did he complete such a mission that was full of mistakes and almost impossible to complete? This was not luck. He was sure. Chapter 1057. The passage of the beast tide lasted for several hours. Thousands of soldiers and horses crossed the single-plank bridge. It was so smooth that it made one's hair stand on end. They had been sent to another universe by Lu Xiaoyi. Although he wasn't sure how far they had gone, for safety's sake, this was a place similar to the Empty Valley. At the very least, they wouldn't be able to return for several months. This was already safe enough for Changsha. The beast tide would no longer exist in the origin world. They would go their separate ways, scattering like birds and beasts to welcome their new lives. He didn't have any psychological burden in letting these void beasts into the origin world. This had nothing to do with whether the void beasts were ferocious or not. Living beings had the right to freely roam the void of the universe, just like how humans could freely enter and exit the positive and negative spaces. Did the void beasts, the natives of the universe, not have this right? Should they be kept in captivity? He also didn't think that this large-scale beast tide would have any effect on the origin world. Seeing so many void beasts at once was indeed shocking, but they couldn't stay together forever. On average, each universe of the origin world was like a small stream flowing into the sea. Now, he no longer cared about the path of these fellows. What he cared about was why the entire plan was so smooth that it made one's hair stand on end. If he could do it all over again, he definitely wouldn't choose to use this method, because in a large-scale beast tide, it was almost impossible for him to escape the consequences of being discovered. But now, he walked over as if he was treading on thin ice. It was as if the heavenly Tao was manipulating him, eliminating all the far-fetched, unreasonable, and flawed factors. It was like a lame, illogical, third-rate village drama. The person who made it up was an idiot, the person who acted was an idiot, and the person who watched was an idiot. After feeling that the surrounding space was empty, Lu Xiaoyi drilled out of the meteorite and looked at the space marked with the coordinates. At the same time, he took the initiative to search with his divine sense. In his perception, there wasn't a single void beast. It had left cleanly and confidently. No, there was still one more. This was a very strange void beast. It had a strange appearance. Of course, there wasn't a single void beast that wasn't strange, but this one was the strangest of the strangest. It was a bit disgusting and wretched, which went against the norm of living beings. It had the shape of a strange snake with two heads. From afar, it looked like a strange two-tailed kite. Lu Xiaoyi did not specialize in the study of void beasts, and no one could study them. This was because void beasts looked very casual and undisciplined, unlike the demonic beasts in the domain, where tigers were tigers and pigs were pigs. There was a clear difference between each of them in terms of appearance, character, and habits. He had been a nascent soul stage 1 for 200 years, and he had spent most of his time roaming the void. He had seen many void beasts, but he had never seen such a strange thing. It was as if a few different void beasts had been pieced together. This thing was pacing back and forth at the place where the spatial tunnel had once appeared. It rushed back and forth, smelling here and there, as if it was wondering why the spatial tunnel had disappeared. Most of the troops had left, leaving it alone. Lu Xiaoyi was also very puzzled. There were hundreds of thousands of void beasts of all sizes. Even if there were some left out, it would be normal for a few Jindan beasts to be left out. But for a void beast of this Yuanying level to be left out, it was very inconceivable. Perhaps it was purely because they had come too late? Unfortunately, there was no next train. Seeing the appearance of a human, the monster became even more nervous. It wanted to run, but it was unwilling. Could the spatial tunnel appear again? If it didn't run, this human didn't seem to be easy to deal with. This was the intuition of a void beast. Lu Xiaoyi had never been in the mood to communicate with a void beast in the void of the universe. However, it was different this time. The entire beast tide was still a mystery to him. He really wanted to know what had happened in the beast tide. Don't waste your energy. The spatial tunnel has already ended. You're too late. The monster vigilantly kept a distance from him, as if it was a little white rabbit, and the human was the big bad wolf. At this point, even if its brain wasn't very bright, it knew that the spatial tunnel probably wouldn't appear again. It shrank its body and was about to slip away. However, it didn't expect a sword light to flash over its head, and a chill went through its body. In the world of cultivators, even the void beasts knew what it meant. It didn't dare to run anymore. It stood there in a daze and spoke without thinking. It's none of my business. I didn't open the spatial tunnel. I only rushed over after hearing the news. I haven't succeeded yet. Lu Xiaoyi had a pleasant expression. He swung his big stick once, but he couldn't swing it anymore. Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you. With your strength, it's impossible for you to open the spatial tunnel. What's your name? I see that your bones are clear and your body is majestic. You must have a great background. The monster hesitated for a moment. It probably knew that it could not answer, so it dawdled. Everyone calls me Fatty, Lu Xiaoyi nodded. Fatty? Good name. Song Yu Ba Mountain, the legacy of creation. Something formed, sensing the spirit of the heavens and earth, obtaining the good fortune of the universe. Let me ask you, why did you come to this void domain? Did you just happen to pass by, or were you invited by a beast? The monster blinked its eyes. Song Yu Ba Mountain, the legacy of creation. This is a good way to put it. This little monster, didn't even know that I had such an amazing origin. However, I can't answer you, because I said my name and you didn't say yours. This isn't the way to get along. Lu Xiaoyi was overjoyed. Oh ho, this monster knew how to get along. He didn't put on any airs. I am Single Ear, a cultivator of the origin world. I happened to discover that you were migrating on a large scale, so I wanted to know the reason. The truth is that I don't have any ill intentions. If I did, your void beast companions would already be in the origin world, so where would I find them? The monster's fear retreated a little, but its cunning heart rose up. It shook its head like a rattle drum. I don't know the specific reason either. It's just that everyone came, so I followed. It's just that I received the news a little late. It's vague. It seems that there's a flaw in the reverse space Tao, and it's better to go to the origin world to develop. My void beast race is used to rushing together. Since everyone came, wouldn't I be at a disadvantage if I didn't come? As for the specific reason, I'm also a little confused at my realm. Lu Xiaoyi also knew that although this fellow wasn't speaking the truth, it was more or less the same meaning. It was in line with the habits of void beasts. Then, which great monster is in charge of this beast tide? It's impossible for you to come from so far away just because some void beast called out, right? The monster shook its head. Of course not. I heard the summons of the true monarch great monster in our void domain. As for who's in charge, I'm not sure. The void domain is vast, so it's impossible for everyone to follow the summons of the beast. It's the great monster in our void domain speaking, and then everyone follows in confusion. I'm afraid that 99 out of 100 people don't know which great monster is in charge. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.